Everyone. Today is Friday, February 21st, and this is a meeting of the Senior Center Site Selection and Building Committee. This meeting will be held in person at the location provided on this notice. Members of the public are welcome to attend this in-person meeting. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and or participation via Zoom is being provided as a courtesy to the public, the meeting or hearing will not be suspended or terminated if technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless otherwise required by law. Members of the public with a particular interest in a specific item on this agenda should make plans for in-person versus virtual attendance accordingly. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may access the proceedings by joining Zoom meeting ID 375-414-6055 or by calling 929-205-6099. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100 prior to the meeting. So I call us to order at 10:02. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair says aye. So for today, I was thinking the format could be, we have Vertex here to give us a presentation. That they could you guys could give a 10 to 15 minute presentation and then be free for questions that we'll go around asking. And then anyone who wants to ask follow-up questions can do that as well. And then, at the end, you guys can give any last.
Yep,
Sound good? All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you again so much for coming and
For accommodating us, I appreciate that. The schedule adjustment there. So did my wife. We're a couple of days in Florida. She's a teacher, so February vacation is a big thing for her. So, great. Okay, so you all have a copy of our presentation. We'll, like I said, try to keep it 10 to 15 minutes. Follow along there. I'm Brian Jarvis. I'm Director of OPM Services for the Vertex Company. Going to talk to you today a little bit about our team that we're proposing for this project, kind of our significant and recent senior center experience that we'll document, including working with your current designer, Catlin Architecture. Try to talk about some things that we think differentiate us from other OPM firms, set us apart, discuss our approach, especially for the schematic design phase, which you all are in. A lot of experience working through that type of structure, as well as things about the budget, but also we can gladly dive into design phase in proper and obviously construction phase as well, and just kind of how we like to communicate and collaborate with teams and with the town's team as we move through a project, and then open it up to questions and answers. So quickly an introduction, as I said, Brian Jarvis, Director of OPM Services for the Vertex Company. Been in construction for over 20 years. I've been doing OPM work strictly for the last 17 years plus now. One of the founding members of our OPM group. We've been doing OPM work since really 2004. Really started getting into it in 2007. As you see, some of our kids done quite a bit over the years. Was part of the Walpole Council on Aging project as well. Have done a bunch of municipal projects for various cities and towns around the Commonwealth. Great.
Brian Ford, Senior PM with Vertex. I've been with the firm for over 10 years now, all of which have been with the OPM vertical. Working with projects similar with this in senior and community centers throughout the Commonwealth. Currently working on the Littleton Senior Center right now with Matt, as that's a great project going on right now. I encourage everybody, if you can, to go and check out as we're getting close to substantial completion with that and hopefully having an open house in May. I'm a local guy. I grew up at North Middlesex, up in Ashby. I currently live in Sterling. I'm a multi-time finisher of the Ayer 5K on Thanksgiving. I'm not going to share my times or anything like that. But, it's a great event. We love to do it every year. But I'd be your main point of contact throughout the design and construction, and even into the closeout and warranty phases.
New York, Matt Sturz, project manager. I would handle all aspects of today project administration, working with Brian and Brian. Through all phases of the project. Been in public construction for about 14 years now. Between the design side, I started on the design side as a licensed landscape architect before making a transition to OPM work about 8 years ago now. I'm also local, 4 traffic lights away, live in Fitchburg. easy to ride into A. Yeah, we would be working with the Bryans. Again, I'm working with Brian in Littleton, just finishing up there. Yeah.
Great. And also on the slide in gray, obviously we have the capacity to staff up the project in future phases. Alan Frawley is one of our construction site managers. We have a staff of about 10 folks that can be on site full-time during construction phase. Diane Gunther would be project accounting. We also have a dedicated project accounting group. So every project that we do gets a dedicated project accounting. You'll see some of the product that they do, working with your town departments, finance and accounting to make sure that every penny is accounted for, ties out. And what we're recommending every month is keeping you on budget and making sure you can make informed decisions. And at the bottom there is really just a bar, being part of a larger company. We do have access to in-house experts, if you will, everywhere from constructability reviews to engineers such as structural, civil, fire protection. We actually have scheduling consultants that can look at contractor schedules and actually run them in the software that contractors use. And the only sub-consultant that we typically do is cost estimating. We use PM&C, who's done Massachusetts Public Work for 20-something years now. We think it's valuable to have a third party, not us or the architect, actually look at where the market is. I mean, we have the information as well, but good success with PM&C. So again, that's just if and when you would need that on a particular project, we have those resources available. But as you see, we really like to approach it from a small firm feel. Next slide. Kind of leading into that, as I mentioned, we've been doing OPM work for the better part of 15 years. We've done over 100 public projects ranging from 2 million up to over 300 million. Everything from council on aging senior centers up to major high schools. We have 48 people in Norwood that only do OPM work. We don't do estimating. We don't do other types of work. They only do OPM. So we have a very deep bench from that perspective. A lot of folks that have worked on these types of projects in addition to the team you see here. And as I mentioned, we have those resources also available in Massachusetts if and when you need them on a project like this. Something as simple as, hey, we found some additional asbestos. We could get somebody out tomorrow to look at that. We need somebody to do a constructability review. We could have someone do that. Again, if we need it, we have it. If not, then we don't. But we really focus on a brand of service that is a really intense customer service. I think if you speak with our references, they'll say the team you see is the team you get. They're involved with everything, really engaged. The goal is to make the project as easy as possible for your team. A lot of folks have full-time jobs in addition to taking on a major project like this. And we really strive to be that trusted partner with the clients that we work with. A lot of our projects that you see both on this page, on the next page, is one of multiple projects that we've done with communities. A lot of projects that we've worked with over cities, 36 towns in Mass, have repeat business. We do about 85% repeat business. And a lot of municipalities were on 3 or more projects. For instance, the Walpole COA was one of 5 projects we've done with the town of Walpole. Again, all procured the same way. So we really strive to be that partner that folks can count on. Next slide. A lot of this was in our response, but just to kind of our experience related to these types of projects. So in addition, a part of that 100 projects or so that we've done over the years, a lot of experience directly dealing with senior/community type buildings. The bold ones you see are kind of the pictures to the right there, as well as town hall buildings, which have a lot of similar spaces. In addition to that, we've done over 50 public safety projects, police, fire stations, DPWs, libraries. So we know the process. We know how to work with cities and towns to maximize their success on projects. And we have a lot of direct experience and recent experience with senior centers, Littleton, Norton, Pembroke, Situate, and Walpole, to name a few. And we ask you to reach out to any of those contacts, and I think they'll give you a little bit more detail of how we do our project.
Great. So one thing we like to showcase here with Vertex on our interviews is our mission statement and our mantra here, which is team, plan, execute. And to dive in a little deeper with our team, we want to build a team that Ayer can see themselves with for the next 3 to 4 years. This is something you want to have a real valued, trusted partner for the foreseeable future. We understand that you have your architect, Catlin designers on board right now, and you'd be looking to bring in an OPM. At that point, we want to bring in the third leg of the stool at some point, which is going to be your general contractor or your construction manager who's going to be doing the actual building with it. We want to assemble the right team for the town of Ayer. As we work into our plan, we want to develop the right plan for this project, specific to this project. We need to get a realistic, comprehensive budget. We'll go into a little deeper as to what actually goes into an overall budget, not just the construction costs, everything that comes into this. We do not want to have any surprises at the end of the day. We want to make sure we have a detailed scope of what the owner is actually providing here. We do not want to have any ambiguity between what the design is and what the contractor is providing and what the town is providing. We want that all detailed and spelled out before we actually go out and start cutting some checks to people. And then communication engagement is going to be a priority here for the town as well. We know that this is going to be a town building supported by the taxpayers of Ayer as well. We need a plan for communication, for engagement, for reaching those people before a vote actually takes place. And then risk management as well. This goes into part of our design. Do we need to select some alternates? Do we have a list of things that maybe are nice to have, but maybe we don't know if we need them right at this time, and things that we identify right now. So when it does come to bid day, we don't have any surprises about what actually our price is going to be and what we can actually afford. And then execute it, bring this home. We want to create what we call a project ego. We don't want a member of our project team who's out here trying to say, design a project for their marketing research. No, we want this project to be for Ayer, and we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page. We want to be tough and fair with everybody. One thing we like to say, your architect's going to be the second biggest contract that you have with the town besides the contractor. We want to make sure that they're designing and bringing in things that's going to be specific and really ties into the fabric of the town. One thing that Brian likes to say in all of our internal meetings is we're not owners, project reporters. We're managers. We manage these people. We manage the other consultants. We make sure when we come to the building committee, we're bringing that message, and we've already done the legwork in order to bring to you guys the decisions that need to be made. So next slide, please. Dive in a little bit more into our strategy regarding that. Knowing that the programming is going to be very important here, which is going to drive the square footage, which is going to drive the price overall project. Have we identified everything for the future? Do we understand if there's going to be any growth with the departments? Is there anything that I believe we just talked about before this interview? If there's any type of multi-purpose space that needs to be used that ultimately other departments can use and share and get some economy in such of a project like this. And do these answers align with our budget? We know that there's a number that was dictated to in the RFQ that came out. Is this something that we need to strive towards? And has everything been accounted for? Has escalation in current market conditions been accounted for in those numbers? And then we need to review our current concept design and use some of the resources that we have that Brian alluded to. Has there been a constructability review done on this? And do we want to make sure that the entire scope of work is accounted for? We'll go into that a little bit more about owners' requirements and what owners are going to be provided for the project. And then lastly, we put a note in here regarding temporary facilities. I understand you have a lease space right now that you're working with. We need to understand what are the restrictions with this. Is there a certain time frame that we need to be out here? We need to look at an overall project schedule that encompasses town meetings, vote decisions, and make sure that we're driving our schedule in order. Next slide, please. And so to dive a little bit deeper into our comprehensive budget, we need to make sure that we're budgeting for everything. And I know I spoke about this a little bit earlier. And you're going to have costs, your three main players, which is going to be your construction manager or general contractor, your designer, as well as your OPM. But there's a lot of things that the owner also needs to prepare for, which is a lot of your furniture, your fixtures, your equipment, a lot of the AV that we see here that's working perfectly. That's sometimes not common when we're building new and can be a real challenge that we need to make sure that we're budgeting for and that we're ahead of time and that the designer is on board building in the provisions into their design to make sure that anything owner provided can be plugged in and play. And then from a budget perspective, this is something that is tracked even starting in design. We fleshed out a total project budget. And we drive that throughout the entire construction of this project. Brian will get into it a little bit more and Matt in regards to how that budget is tracked, presented, and the town is able to see what has been committed, what has been spent, and what is left to spend based upon these contingencies. And we always like to say, people remember the first number. So we're very sensitive to when a number gets out, what needs to be driven towards, and ultimately how we have to make sure we maintain that, because we like to say there's no going back once a number is out and a project is established.
Yeah, especially here where you're going on a schematic design phase, budget, like that's the budget people are making a decision on, and obviously we need to make sure it's accounted for, continuously go over this thing, kind of, or in the design phase. And obviously when you get to construction is where you have a lot of risk related to cost, but you need to know that now, which is pretty early in the process, but entirely doable. We do a lot of school projects that way, so very
Yeah.
familiar with that.
Thank you. So some of our cost control strategy that we have too is, like I said, that your designer is going to be your second largest expense here. We want to make sure that they're designing to your budget and also designing to your needs. We need to make sure that the square footage that is being presented here is efficient and also accounts for any future growth that you have. One thing that we can do with our resources throughout the design process is also providing that cost estimate and doing constructability reviews, making sure there's any inefficiencies or things that we've had in previous jobs that have ultimately led to a change order during the construction phase. And then ultimately, we want to educate, advise, err on the designer's recommendations. What does this do to the budget? What does it do to the schedule? And ultimately, if there's going to be any changes when it comes to the construction phase of a project. With those milestone cost estimates, we want to really understand the marketplace. Having those milestones of estimates can really determine, with uncertainties such as tariffs right now, steel steel is a big one right now. That's a big uncertainty in the
Down
construction.
16% in a year.
Yeah.
Right. So it's something that needs to be accounted for, and it's something that we want to make sure that no one is surprised by when it
Part of the
becomes bid
strategy,
day.
right?
So, and then, like we said, we create a bid day strategy when we can take out maybe some wants, or not needs. So when that bid day comes, it opens up your options as to how you want to execute this construction project. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Brian. As Brian was alluding to, we have fairly involved financial reporting. We want to make sure that you know where every dollar is on the project at all times. Now, early in the project, once a budget is established, we'll work with you to develop a cash flow so that any borrowing that may need to happen can be appropriately timed, and funds are available for paying invoices as the project incurs expenses. One tool that I do want to focus on here is our vendor invoice package, or you may hear us refer to it as our VIP. This is something that we prepare in concert with our accounting department, and it's provides a complete picture of the financial status of the project, so that again you'll know where every dollar is. This accounts for things like commitments, amendments, any change orders that may have been incurred, and then budget transfers from contingency to augment a line item as needed. So this is a tracking tool that clients tell us is something that they really appreciate, that they find really helpful. So we want to make sure that we're maximizing the value of our reporting in this regard. Have the next slide, please. Switching gears slightly, we know that you have a site that you're looking at, the Bishop Road site, and working with Catlin, there may be different ways to configure the program that you're looking to fit on the site. So we often use a tool like this. It's an options matrix, or later it's called a traffic light matrix, just because it's intuitive and I think approachable way to evaluate all of your different criteria and determine how different configurations we may develop with Catlin are able to meet those optimally. And we find this is useful not just as a due diligence tool during the design and programming phase, but also as a communications tool for public outreach, because I think it lays a lot of the decision making out in a intuitive way, which is helpful when you're looking to build public support for the project, taking it to the community and looking for their support. Can I have the next slide?
Yeah, the key to this, just quickly, is it's your criteria down the left side. Again, it kind of comes and goes with what's important to Ayer, and then kind of the options across the top. And as Matt said, we find this very helpful because then it's able to show the public that we've looked at every option. and every option had its pros and cons, and obviously the ones with more green were maybe more favorable across the criteria. And when you say, oh yeah, I got to option 8, everyone says, oh, that makes sense. It seems like you had the most green. We picked the right one. You don't get to a town meeting and say, well, you look at this, and they say no, and you know, it blows up credibility in some cases. So we try to make it as simple as possible to say that you've really gone through the process.
When you say green, does that
Green-
mean?
Green is green.
Creating more open space and trees and.
Well, green meaning just a better, yeah.
But what?
Well, that can be something that you
But
evaluate.
that could be, that could be a criteria, so it could say one of our criteria is like, how well does it meet open space or sustainability? And
Right.
some options might be more favorable than others.
So one big concern for a lot of like townspeople is conserving.
That's right.
Open space and, you know, keeping as many
That's right.
mature trees as possible.
So some options might do a better job than that, so that would be one of your criteria that's important to you down the left side, and so the options would be, okay, well, this option clears the whole site, it's red, this option saves the most trees, it's green, and there's everywhere in between. You'd say, these are the criteria we came up with, and this is how these options play out, so. Yeah, this can create a lot of conversation, but I think just from a public's perspective is to be able to present and being like, oh, it's very clear that the, you know, in an example, you know, the option in the middle and maybe the option to the right were most favorable, and you can kind of go into more detail. This is why we picked this one, so, found that we use this on almost every one of our projects, including, you know, major school projects. We're looking at 4 or 5 sites.
I was just gonna say, this becomes very more in depth when there's
Yeah.
5 to
Yeah, we've
6
had-
different
yeah.
locations where the project could
Yeah.
actually happen.
And we've
so
had
it
this
really-
20 wide at one point because you got, here's 6 options for this site, here's 6 options for that site. You start to pare it down and, you know, people really start to, you know, gravitate towards the one that makes the most sense, so.
And no, we weren't expecting you to read all that text.
No.
Yeah, no. Can I have the next slide, please? Before I hand it off to Brian, I should probably touch on the definition of owner items. Usually the primary focus of this is the FF&E, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, which you could imagine being basically everything that if you grabbed the building and turned it over and shook it, all the things that would fall out of it. So we work with the architect's interior design team to make sure that all of your furniture, fixture, equipment, technology, communications, security, all of these items are accounted for so that we can create a realistic budget for them to account for them early in the project so that they don't need to be, you know, added back either via a retrofit or a change order when that could have been prevented by integrating with the design team's approach. And also developing a definite specific procurement plan for how these items will be purchased, whether you're using something like a state bid list contract that's existing, or whether you're doing a specialty procurement via some sort of Chapter 30B, you know, goods and services procurement. We want to be able to identify how things will be procured so that we can do it in the most efficient way possible. Now, as we go, our second bullet there about integrating is really important because some of these things, you know, involve a lot of in-wall components. It's really important that we get those in place early in the project. But as always, the goal is, you know, through all of this to ease the burden on the town's team and not leave you with loose ends in trying to figure all of these things out. We want to be the driver of that.
Yeah, this is an example down the street in Littleton. We're at the point where we're getting a lot of deliveries now for everything that we've worked up to this point and actually getting in. That includes workout equipment, a lot of the furniture and office equipment that's going in, the audio visual systems that are going in, and a lot of coordination that Matt's been doing a great job with is making sure that our construction schedule is hitting that window when we're delivering. We don't want to deliver TV screens when we're still sanding on walls and putting potential risk at the stuff that we're putting in. So we're in constant communication. We have transition meetings with these vendors, making sure that, okay, are we ready to accept everything that's coming in and making sure that there's no damage. And then we also want to make sure we're not in too late because we want to open up and be able to utilize this building as soon as possible. So working with Liz Tridiak down the street, it's the most excited she's been part of the project to actually see some of this stuff going in the building and really seeing the building start to take shape.
Yeah, we actually manage this. Part of that vendor invoice package is we'll handle all the procurement related to that. So purchase orders, we'll track all that. Budget, invoices will come in, we'll review it. Yep, it was received, it wasn't received, it's damaged. Good to go, pay this, don't pay this. So the goal is that the building committee gets one package every month with everything from the contractor's rec to the invoice for the TV monitors. And you make a decision with everything in one place. So very helpful.
Sure.
Next slide. And finally, just to start to wrap up a little bit, kind of given the phase and your approach to where you want to go, is draping that community support and communicating, obviously, some of the tools that we provide to the building committee can then be, either summarized and presented at community levels. We're very accustomed and very comfortable with helping cities and towns raise supports for their project. Obviously, a major capital project is one of the largest projects they're going to undertake and one of the biggest capital expenditures. How we keep those folks informed, we've done everything from actually creating a brand new website to supporting websites to creating other pages, as little or as much as you need. We can run with it. We can support it however you want to do it. We're comfortable being in front of community groups to help explain the process. Those, everywhere from these small little coffee shop meetings to larger, community forums to maybe get some input or to provide an update along the way. We've also done a lot where leading up to town meeting, we do the info sessions prior to town meeting, so people can ask a lot of detailed questions, hopefully makes town meeting go faster. Again, willing to whatever works best for Ayer, we'll do that. And then again, different types of deliverables that come out. What you see here are some examples. Top left is a flyer that we do reverse mail to every resident that basically says, hey, we're having a community forum. This is a school project in Millis. Come out, we're going to talk about the current status of the project at this point. We lead those presentations, if you will, with whomever, building committee chairpersons, school superintendent, DPW director, whatever the project is. We'll gladly take point on that along with the architect. There's also the next item there is a tool that we can actually create like 2-minute videos with one of the vendors that we use that can really sum up the project in 2 minutes, hit on all the key points that people can digest, put that through social media. And then obviously flyers and things, with summaries to the right there on some of our projects with however you want to communicate, we can make that work. And again, the bolded point there is really, as much or as little as you think you need that we can help you with. And we'll have a lot of ideas with, hopefully supplementing what you currently have. And even through construction, we do updates throughout construction. We do stuff with local television. I've hosted a couple like This Old House type shows where we actually walk through projects and they do a once a month update on community television where I'm kind of walking them through the status of projects. So again, we love doing this, and it's the most important thing that you do as part of this project is making sure that everyone understands the project. They may not agree with everything, but they at least understand how you got there, which is huge. And you're able to, again, get the right demographics behind the project.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've had success with on these projects and getting out and engaging with the community is being flexible and doing different times for different things. We understand that people have kids and they can't come to a 7:30 meeting at a library for an information session. Maybe it's a breakfast at the senior center that we're doing at the existing location to show where you're currently living right now. Or maybe it's a Zoom meeting on a weekend to try to gather as many people as we can to make sure that we're reaching as much as we can.
Yeah, I think part of, important to us is trying to make sure that our teams are close enough that we can do that. I mean, being within 30 minutes of that really lends itself to that flexibility. Because we understand how important that is. To also have folks hear it from the professionals on the team, right? It's just not the usual advocates in town. They're always asking us to approve a project. Well, we're actually telling you what prices are. And I think sometimes that resonates a little bit more. So we can answer plenty of the hard questions as well. So next slide. So that kind of wraps us up here, just to kind of talk quickly about that schematic design and kind of our approach to that and why we think we maybe stand apart from others. As you saw, proven track record of projects successfully for our clients, over 100 projects, 30 communities, multiple communities with 3, 4, 5 projects, really being that trusted partner. That collaborative, transparent process that we try to build and maintain to engage with the community, get that support. I think a lot of the documents and deliverables that we do is again, at your disposal to make sure that people really understand, they don't have any unanswered questions, if you will, on the project. We have a very team-specific approach to this project with a team that's done a comparable project right next door in Littleton. Locally, live locally to this project and be here for these types of events. We've worked with your designer before, Catlin, on a handful of projects, so we know John very well, the ups and downs and all that in between. Responsive and local, as I mentioned, and again, large enough at Vertex to bring in resources if and when needed, if it's going to help the project. But again, really focus on delivering that small firm attention and focus, if you will, and engagement level that you're going to get with a small OPM team like this. And with that, we'll next slide. Let's open it up to questions and discussion. Did you have some other slides? If we need to bring them up, maybe to accentuate an answer, we can. But that we have for right now.
Thank you. Right. So we have some questions. So what benefit can your firm provide to the Ayer Senior Center project that other OPM firms may not be able to?
I'll start. I think it's a depth of the experience. I mean, having done probably 15 of these, everything from doing a construction ability review, reviewing our change order logs from, hey, this is what happened on John's last 2 projects. These were the change orders. How do we fix this in design on this project? It doesn't happen. Did he correct his details? I think it's in addition to that engagement of a small team, having the bench available where, hey, we need somebody to come out and support something, and we need someone to help with the marketing. We need someone maybe to do something with the constructability review, or we need an expert opinion to, look at something that the designers team did. We can bring that resource in as needed. But again, if we don't need it, we don't need to put that into the budget. But I think that helps give us that flexibility of meeting your needs.
Yeah, and I think also just the relative location on where we are right now. I think this is a perfect location with working down the street as well. Matt and I being very available and ready to do this with a very similar project down the street that has gone very successful.
Okay. Next question. In your experience, what is the most difficult / challenging part of a project, and what is the most enjoyable?
The ribbon cutting. What we've, and in all seriousness though, on those, with projects like this, with senior center, we do have a lot of experience with public safety as well. I think what differentiates the two is public safety is really a need for the town. And with senior center, there's an emotion that comes with those as well. And so when you get to the end of these at the ribbon cutting and you see the seniors that are going to be utilizing this building, it really hits home, and it's really rewarding for the project team at that point. And so obviously I'm a little sentimental. I like that stuff at the end, and that's one of my favorite parts of the project. From a most challenging, I would say it's coordination with owner provided items. I mean, as great and smoothly as Littleton has gone, there's a pretty robust audio visual system that's going in there. We coordinate with LCTV, who's the TV representative in town, and they want to be able to broadcast meetings from there. They have a multi-purpose room that they have a lot of ideas on what they're going to do in there. They're going to have dining, they're going to have dance classes, they're going to have pickleball tournaments in this room, but they also want to broadcast meetings from future select board meetings or building committee meetings there. There's a lot that goes into that. And so that started in design, where we were really having meetings about how are the provisions in this. How are we going to have a camera with a pickleball tournament going on? Like, we need to think about this stuff ahead of time. And it's burned a lot of calories to get to where we're at right now, to be honest. But we're there, we're installing it now. And I think all the hard work before that is starting to pay dividends. And we're going to be able to have a real showcase room that has a lot of capability at the end. So that was really, probably the biggest challenge for a project like this.
And I'll jump in just quickly, and Brian touched on a little bit, is we talk a lot about the why we do things. The why is really that making communities safer, whether that's public safety, making communities safer. The senior center, I think we talked about this in responses, really ends up being the heart of the community. So it's that, why do we want to get up and go to work every day? Is when you see those buildings, when they're all done, and you understand what it brought to a community. But the how we get that done, and the what we do with like the schedule updates and stuff, like everyone does the what, but like you really have to have that why behind it. So the difficult part sometimes is getting over that hump with why it's, why you're doing it and why the right decision is now. Because I think a lot of folks will say, well, we're not quite sure yet, we'll put this off, and trying to communicate with things only get more expensive, usually never go backwards. It's very difficult sometimes to get everyone kind of on board with that to get it to a successful vote, because then you put your heart into it, and the most difficult part is, going to a town meeting and you just didn't reach everybody and it doesn't pass. That's very difficult in a reality for a lot of projects that aren't, unfortunately not a school project where they may be getting state funding. So especially DPWs always seem to be the last one on the list. So that's extremely difficult is how do you make sure that you have overturned every stone, you've given all the information. Again, even if they don't agree with you, they understand the process was sound, the numbers are right, now is the time to do this. That is the biggest hurdle, which is probably, most people say that, but again, the reward at the end is, yeah, you got through that together as a community, and usually find even the people that were very adamant against it were like, oh, this is great, glad we did this. And that's the goal.
It's also rewarding as part of the public engagement, is when you can bring people along and convert people
Yeah.
that may have opposed it at the beginning. Once you show your work as part of the public engagement process, to get some of those folks onto your side and to be convincing and have the value of the project shine through to the community is something that we take a lot of pride in as well.
I want to keep consistent, so it's like this one.
No, I do, well, no, I think we can just keep going.
Please now, go ahead.
Because I said there last time, we're kind of out of order.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, so this is a long one, sorry.
Okay.
Can you provide some detail on your firm's experience in accurately estimating a project like the Ayer Senior Center through the schematic design phase only? And then do you see any advantages or challenges to completing schematic design by June 30th, 2025? And maybe you can
Yes,
kind of
yeah,
elaborate
so
on a little more on that.
the reason behind that question is that we're currently funding this stage of the project through a state housing choice grant. And so that funding runs out June 30th. So they're sort of, even though we're looking at a timeline of a fall town meeting, we're trying to get through schematic design to get the number to take to town meeting. That's got to be done by June 30th.
And I believe in the RFQ, you'd mentioned that in fall town meeting of this year
Mhm.
would be the intention to go for all construction funds as well. Okay,
Yep.
so even more important to do our due diligence now and making sure that we're confident in this schematic design number. That
Also
it's
gives you a
going
little
to-
bit of time from June until fall town meeting, which is good. So it won't be a true, it'll be actually, more like a DD estimate, design development estimate potentially. Sure. So I'll to answer your question. So we do a ton of MSBA school projects, Mass School Building Authority projects. Their process actually requires those projects to be approved based on schematic design. So those towns go to town meeting with $100 million, $200 million, $300 million projects with, that's your budget. Prove it, you got to fund it all right now and not a dollar more. So the process, we actually bring that to all of our projects, whether it's a school project or smaller projects like this, it's the same process, right? You have to make sure that, again, you've gotten everything into that budget, you've accounted for all the, what's the designer doing, what is the owner providing, what's the contractor gonna provide, get that budget, get it as tight as you can, get that estimate done, thoroughly make sure that estimates in enough detail, do a counter estimate so that we're reconciling, that we have at least not only whatever Catlin is saying, but whatever our estimator or even another one if we need one. Make sure that we're vetting all of that out. We're understanding what our potential flexibility is with those budgets. So these could potentially come out. We could potentially change a material. We could create this as an alternate on bid day where we don't necessarily need to accept it to stay within our budget. You create that flexibility like Brian and Matt were talking about. So we've done this process on probably every one of our projects in some form or fashion that had a vote related to schematic design. And the goal is to make sure that we're able to do that market analysis, show you not only where your project range is falling, but how does that compare to other comparable projects, senior centers that we've done that have hard numbers associated. John will have that information. We have that information to say, hey, the senior centers these days are costing, I'm just throwing this out there, $650 to $750 a square foot in public construction. We're at, like the dealer would say, hey, we got all this done, and we're at $651. That'd be a great story to tell versus we're at $751, right? So it's understanding where that falls and how we're making decisions to give you those options. But yeah, we do this on just about every project.
And I'm sorry. I think from your schedule perspective, is this something that can be done between June is what you're asking? I think, one of our first order of business is calling our designer and saying, I want to see your design schedule right now. And here is our milestones on what we need from a finance schedule, what we have money until, what we have for a town meeting. Now let's work backwards from these dates. Okay, what are we going to have? Where's our checkpoints? When are we meeting? And ultimately, this is your delivery date on when we need something. So,
Yeah, and I think from an overall schedule perspective, a job of this size, you would typically budget 3 months as a just finger in the air for a schematic design phase. So
That's what that's what John.
yeah,
Is that right?
you get going, especially where you're not doing a whole bunch of due diligence on other sites. It's really just becomes conceptual.
on the site.
Right, so it becomes what option do you like the best? And where you don't necessarily need the number, you just need to be done with schematic design, having done the work for the funding. That's different than being prepared for town meeting, which gives you another 3 months. So it's not like we need to hurry up and get that estimate done to be done for June 30th, like we have some time. Like the school projects we talk about, you have to have all of that estimating done, all of that vetting done. So you have to bake in all of that decision time, value engineering time to get to a number because you're going to town meeting with that schematic design. So here we have you have a couple extra months ahead.
Right, just no
Which is great.
money to pay for anything.
That's right, yeah,
Right, yeah,
that's
okay.
Now, having a third-party estimator who does nothing but estimating. I mean, they do this all the time. They very much have their finger on the pulse of what things cost because they're estimating things constantly and using actual bid data from
Yep.
their previous projects to inform how things are tracking in terms of real market prices for the things that you're estimating. It's also, I think, appropriate, in terms of going back to what Brian was talking about sort of making sure that all things are accounted for within the project budget to carry an appropriate design contingency for the things that you anticipate are coming, but that aren't designed yet because you're only at a schematic design level, just to make sure that you have a little bit of flexibility to adjust the programming while remaining on budget throughout the rest of the design phases.
Yeah, because that's so the schematic design estimates typically at square foot cost. You don't have all the systems designed yet. You say we're going to use this type of
MEPs.
unit. It costs X dollars a square foot. And we're going to do this on the landscape. We have roughly the square footage of patio. And we're going to put in this many plants. But again, nothing has really been formally designed. Those estimates will get more and more detailed as the design gets more detailed throughout the process. But in that schematic design, typically they carry a line item called design contingency, which is basically what Matt said. Here's a placeholder of as we design, we're obviously going to draw into that. So that will go down as our design gets more detailed and the costs for individual items go up and it offsets. But you need to make sure that's in there because you're missing, that could be 10, 12% of your design budget if it's not accounted for correctly.
And do you have a sense, the difference between the cost estimates based on the schematic design and what ultimately is the cost estimate based on constructible building documents?
Yep.
Is there a kind of sweet spot there that you ought to be within X percentage coming out of one into the other, or is it hard to know ahead of time where you're gonna?
I mean, it's hard to know based on outside. I mean, some outside factors, obviously the tariff thing, like a tariff could screw that up. Depending on what changes during that phase, like you might end up adding something or deleting something that's major based on some other requests in town. I mean, our goal is always to be within a couple percentage points of that last estimate. I mean, under 10, you can pretty much manage that. You get over 10% now a lot of times when you go from schematic design to design development and you're over 10%, like you're really only talking about square footage at that point. You're not really going to change something unless you have a major site element or something like that you can remove. You're not going to be taking things out of the design. You're going to sacrifice program. Like square footage is the biggest way to pick up that cost. So our goal is always to be within, a couple percentage points.
What you said here, Brian, and the goal is ultimately to have that same budget throughout the entire
Yeah.
thing, from schematic all the way until our bid documents happen. And when you start at schematic, the design contingency that he's talking about, well, it will be large. It will be a certain percentage of what that construction is. And as we move into different milestones, design development, 50% construction documents, 75% construction documents, things are being fleshed out in that design, and that design contingency is now decreasing. And therefore it's supplementing maybe the higher construction costs as we go up. So the goal is that design contingency is decreasing while maybe the construction cost is increasing, but we're at the same budget throughout the entire design process to bid document.
And that's where our goal with that budget sheet that you saw is that once you set that budget in schematic design and it's a $17 million project, the goal is that every major milestone, that budget is still showing 17 million. Now, how we rearrange some of the pieces with, maybe we can defer the TV monitors, or maybe it's a grant, or maybe, hey, that could be an alternate and we can break out the construction a little bit more. The goal is that every budget milestone is that whatever that number is in schematic design, which you promised the town meeting, we're hitting that and the goal is that we come to bid day with enough alternates and enough strategy on bid day to say when the bids come in, we're still hitting it or even under that. And that is ultimately the goal. Yeah.
To use Brian's as an example, the vendor invoice packet that we have, one of the first pages that you'll see when you open up is the total project budget. And if at all town meeting, we go for a number and that is the number that has been approved, that number is at the bottom and it is highlighted and that doesn't go up anymore. So this is the money that we have that's been approved and is the appropriation for this. And all of the things that lead up into that is what is manipulated and worked with throughout our design to making sure that that number can still be achieved before we go into construction.
Do you guys use PC&M as a consultant? Is that built into your fee?
Yeah, that'd be built into a fee. You'd see that as a line.
You carry that, when you give us a fee ultimately.
It'll be broken out, so you'll see what that is, and it'll most likely, in this case, carry one estimate, the schematic design. You'll have a broken out fee for that.
Okay,
Yep.
so are you aware that Fogarty is the guy that's working for Catlin right now? Everybody seems to know
Very,
that.
very
We
familiar.
use Fogarty a lot as well.
That's only seen on Google.
There's a handful of estimators in this market. We've worked with Fogarty, not as much as PMC, but again, a lot of designers carry PMC. We have 2 or 3 others that we use.
Yeah, okay.
And one thing I'm very familiar with is after we receive 2 estimates, one from Catlin or AM Fogarty, and then ours would be from PM&C, is that we hold a reconciliation meeting, which
Yeah,
is getting
sure,
them
that's
both,
logical.
getting them both in the room. And I've attended a AM Fogarty and PM&C reconciliation numerous times. So I understand the process. You know, they're both very confident in their numbers, and you know, our goal is to make sure that, you know, we have these discussions that can drag on a little bit, but we want to make sure that these 2 estimates are within a few percentage points of themselves so that we're confident.
Right, and
before going
we're
forward.
also conservative where, you know, Timothy's at, you know, whatever $1 a square foot and PMC is slightly higher. Like we're not taking the lower one to meet the number. We're like, guys, we need to get to an agreement with what we think.
The
we need to
scope
carry.
that's involved and.
Yeah, typically we're gonna work it so that the higher of the 2 estimates is within budget. I mean, that's usually what we need to do. So yeah, very familiar with that process. And again, those are they could be multiple hour meetings where you have to come back and check, you know, what's been changed and making sure what was talked about the last meeting was updated, and then coming back to the building committee with, hey, we could do this change to a material or this change in square footage or rearrange a space this way to pick up this, you know, and present with here's options that you could select. And then, okay, based on what's selected, we'll do an updated estimate to really drive it home. So yeah, it's quite a process and very important when you're asking for approval at this stage of the process.
The good news is that we've done everything right so far to get exactly where we're supposed to be. So that's a good. So Fogarty has been working with us, as you probably know, through the
Right.
feasibility study.
Yep.
Good job. So
Mhm.
we
Yeah, it's
do have a
great.
pretty comprehensive budget at the
Excellent.
moment. I don't know if you've seen, I
Yeah,
don't think
John-
anyone's seen that detail.
We haven't seen it, but John knows that. He knows what he's building, so he's really finger on the pulse of that side as far as what this costs. So usually a pretty good indicator of where you're at is pretty accurate with John.
Right. Question number 4, can you provide an example of a municipal energy saving project or managed? What was the projected % savings in the operation of the building? Could be solar power, HVAC, geothermal, or any related energy saving technology.
Yeah, so I'll start. So a couple things. One thing I always say is you're making a very energy efficient building. It's a new construction. It is also much bigger and has much more systems than your current facility has. So while it's extremely efficient,
Not even close.
it's more expensive than the budget that you currently use for the same facility, because now you have all this other stuff like security and air conditioning. So that's something that during this process, are you budgeting appropriately for the operation of this building after it opens? Because everyone's like, it's super energy efficient, but yes, but now we have a full building with air conditioning with security and all this AV that we've never had before. So that's one. Example, Medway DPW, we actually did a net zero building on a DPW, which is amazing given the, you know, how much overhead doors open. They did solar arrays over their parking canopy on the roof. They went through the Eversource Smart program at that point. Had a return on investment of about 7 years. So another 2 years or so, 3 years, they're going to be, you know, technically off the grid from an electric perspective. Smaller projects like this can be very difficult because you don't have a lot of roof space or a lot of site space. So even from a geothermal perspective, you may or may not have a footprint big enough to really offset the cost of what you're doing, you know, what your cost to put that in. Something to think about. The other thing to think about is the next edition of the building code is extremely stringent as far as building envelope and energy efficiency, where you're going to have a lot of cost just in the structure of the building alone that is going to drive the price up versus actually having the finished product of a PV array or geothermal. And I'll just finish. We've done, I don't know, 2 dozen, 3 dozen net zero energy schools. We did the Boston Data Science Center down in ComAv, the one that looks like the Jenga blocks. It's all over the place. That's carbon-free net zero with Boston University, has 600 wells below ComAv. We just did geothermal on our last 4 elementary school projects. So the offset to that is typically, depending on the size of the building and the size of the energy you can produce, really determines the offset. Schools, they're never gonna offset what they use on electricity, but they put a dent in that, especially in off hours. One of the things that we can also bring in is we have a controls consultant that really comes in to maximize the building controls and can do the optimization of those, because what ends up happening is you commission, the building starts running, but you realize that, you know, the fan runs 24/7 where it really doesn't need run 24/7, or the kitchen folks come in and fire everything up first thing in the morning, but they're not cooking till 1 o'clock. Like, they start to trend all this stuff. If you want to put that in your project and say, well, if you stagger the starts of equipment, you can reduce your energy cost by X. And we actually have that data on a handful of our recent school projects. So.
Yeah. At the very least, what we would do too is with Catlin's consultants is getting into, at least approaching the Mass Save program
Yep.
and seeing what our options are, what pathway would we be able to do and what type of reimbursement that we'd be coming for. We wouldn't be counting on it in our budget, but it would also be something great at the end of the project that we could get some. I think currently right now it's about $2,000 per ton for a VRF system, which is kind of an air source, air conditioning and heat pump system. And that's something that we would drive and work with Eversource or National Grid, the local utility, in order to get those rebates at the end of the project. For example, down the street in Littleton, we also worked with the select board who were able to achieve a grant with the local senator for solar panels on both their library and the senior center that they have here.
He's already committed to us for that.
That's great. Is it the same?
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah.
Great. And that's great. And the only thing he requires, I think, is a photo op towards the end.
Yeah, right.
So we've had to coordinate we've got to just make sure we got a podium and a shiny pair of scissors for him. But we were able to achieve about I believe it was $200,000 for the senior center project. We were able to include it as part of our bid package. The bids came in around $230,000 for the entire project, so it was almost paid for by this grant. And the hope is the Littleton project is all electric, so we aren't going to be able to generate all of the power that we have, even though we have a local municipal lights service there. But it's going to offset at least 30% of the power that's being generated there. So it's something that we make sure that we're helping and providing support if there is, opportunities to going out for grants or any, local representation that needs to be reached out to about any potential earmarks.
And in terms of public outreach, how have you found different communities' willingness to tolerate the initial upfront capital costs as opposed to explaining to them that over the long run, the building
Sure.
operations would be less expensive?
Runs the gambit. Some towns are all in and they, no matter what, that's how they want to move forward with very sustainable net zero energy type projects. Some really need to see the ROI and the cost benefit analysis mapped out. Like in instance for Medway, like they examined the upfront capital cost of that PV system. It said in 7 years we own it and we have no electric bill for our DPW, which is fantastic. So that was, we helped with mapping all of that out with the cost, and they had all their utility cost information associated with it. So it really becomes the appetite historically of the community, and we can help provide as much information.
But I agree to your point. There are some municipalities where, there's a real green initiative and there needs to be geothermal on this project. And we'll do a life cycle analysis to show it's going to cost you $1.5 million to put this geothermal system inside the ground. And that payoff is never really going to be achieved in anybody's lifetime for here. So it becomes almost a decision from the town on whether or not this is something that they really want to put in, and then creating that message to the overall community after.
Okay. What role will your firm play in marketing and outreach to the public as well as town officials in preparation for the fall town meeting? I know you've addressed it.
Yeah, sure. So one thing that we like to do is really establish what these dates are for all of the committees that need to be involved. In Littleton, we've had to meet with the conservation, the planning board, leading up to a select board meeting, to the advisory finance committee to go over all of our finances and how we're presenting this number to it. So it's something we're very familiar with, is really making sure not only the outreach to the community that I think we touched on, and attending community forums and hosting and getting flyers out there, but also attending specific boards that are going to need to be involved here, that are either making an opinion or making some sort of judgment against this project as well. So things that we're definitely prepared to do.
To that point, it's always helpful going into town meeting with all of the preceding boards with unanimous decisions in favor of the project. Like, that's a lot of impact. To the point though of community engagement, it's also helpful just to have dedicated community meetings or forums related to the project, so folks feel like they can ask questions, felt like their opinions were heard. you create frequently asked questions where you put it on your website where, again, people that are just tuning in close to town meeting, oh, I didn't know we were doing a senior center, that always happens. We've been doing it for, a year, but, so the goal is making sure that you have the variety of events and engagements and types so that anyone that is interested has the opportunity. And you also have the track record then of saying, well, when you get to town meeting, here's all of the events and communications that were out there and all the opportunities that folks had to put their input. And then people start to say, well, yeah, we engaged, and it's a great process. It helps with gathering the support that you need. So I think it's a combination of both, running the typical town meeting cycle that you need to get through to formally get to a town meeting, but also those very dedicated, pointed discussions with the demographics that you really need to reach, so they feel like their voice is heard.
Do you feel that there's a budget line that you have to put in for marketing materials?
Usually pretty minimal. I mean, depending on how you want to reach out, like the reverse mailer that goes out to all the residents is $1,000. It's not a big deal. A lot of the stuff we generate, PowerPoint presentations, I mean, there's no cost.
One thing that we want to make sure that the designer is building in with their marketing purposes is, when we're doing these community forums, everyone likes to see a good visual. And so if there's renderings or if there's boards that need to be provided, sometimes what goes a long way are boards with existing conditions. Some fire stations are in terrible repair, and putting these pictures up of what the conditions are or what the current senior experience is right now goes a long way when we're doing these community forums. So that's something we would build in and make sure that that's being covered by the designer, because we want them to be, providing the best renderings that we can.
It helps articulate a clear why for the project, which is really important in getting that message out there. For instance, in working in Shrewsbury for their DPW, part of that is bringing the water and sewer garage into the building. And when we show pictures of insulation falling out of the ceilings and the fact that you can see the outside from the inside, that goes a long way. Why we need the project.
And this cost effective ways, I mean, video tours, having tours of the existing facility, like Brian said, I mean, those are folks that are interested, that's inexpensive marketing that you don't really need a whole lot of formal documentation or anything like that. So, and those are things that you just schedule ahead of a building committee meeting and do a tour of the facility and, get some free publication.
Please describe a typical day on the job mid-project. And how do you handle potential workload conflicts among multiple projects that you're assigned to? And what are your best practices for avoiding excessive change orders?
Loaded question. Excellent. Yeah, I'll step in on the change order one. We take change orders extremely seriously. I'd like to consider ourselves almost like the gatekeeper of the town's wallet on these. And so has there ever been a project without change orders? No, there hasn't. But what we like to be is proactive, and we're going out and seeking things during design, during constructability reviews, our past experiences with our current designer now and other projects that are similar like this, making sure things are picked up and are in the documents so that when a contractor is on board and something is missed, we're not subject to their overhead and profit and escalation fees that are part of that. One other thing we do with change orders is that these are fully vetted and discussed and thought about before we even approach the town or the building committee on this. We'll have dedicated change order review meetings with the site superintendent and the project manager of the contractor. And then at the same time, we're keeping the designer honest as well. We want them to defend their drawings and making sure that what was the intention of the drawing here before we ever present something to the building committee for approval. So I think in other projects, we want to build that trust with the building committee that if we're coming to you with a change or any type of a budget appropriation, this has gone through a ringer and a real rigorous process on how we're attacking any changes to the project.
Dan, I don't know if you want to bring the slides back up. We actually have a slide on this. But we also have a PCO log, pending change order log when we get to construction. If you want to scroll down at the end there.
It is below the thank you slide.
Keep going.
Oh.
Thank you. Yep. That one there with the green on it. Yeah, so once you get to construction, there's actually two ways that the budget gets affected. One, it's a construction change order, and one, it's a soft cost change. So we have tracking, again, not intended to see this, but the middle one is our pending change order log. That becomes part of the monthly budget update that you get. It gets presented at every building committee meeting. Items in yellow are things we have fully vetted that we're recommending. Here's a change order. Items in green, excuse me. Items in yellow are things we're still reviewing. Items in white are brand new, like, hey, this is out there, we're taking a look at it. How does this affect our contingency? You know, down below that is how that's affecting your construction contingency, what's left, what's remaining. To the left is actually the same type of document that we do for all your soft costs, so all your furniture, technology. This is based on the budgets we put together during design that are in your total project budget, because things pop up. Hey, we need an extra monitor, or hey, they don't make this chair anymore. We have to get this one, it's more expensive. So you see how we're managing all of that stuff. And these are day one in the construction phase. Typical day on a project during the design phase. I mean, the way that we set up our fees is, obviously we're not dedicated to your project full time. That's just not economical for you. But our goal is that you never know that. So that when you call us, it's like, yep, we're meeting on Thursday night. Well, we're going to make Thursday night happen. Having kind of the depth on some of our teams, we're able to have people cover as needed, so that Matt really needs to be here tonight, and Matt can be here tonight, and someone else can cover in Shrewsbury, because we have a team for that in Shrewsbury. Managing your time from a larger staffing perspective, we put a lot of effort into making sure that the folks that get presented for projects have the capacity to do this brand of service that we want. So for instance, they're rolling off of Littleton, they have capacity that's coming available, perfect timing for this type of project. So we're not saying, you know, contractually they have 60 hours a week on projects. They don't. We really try to keep it manageable so that they can provide the type of service that you folks all, you know, deserve on a project like this.
What will be your average time, like in the field on the project at the site? Like, say mid-project.
During construction. So typically how we set up a project of this size is that you have a project manager like Matt, who might have, you know, 12 hours a week to 16 hours a week, depending on what works for your budget. And again, we didn't know all that prior to putting together a schematic design budget, to have a full proposal of what our, you know, our fee would be with what we're planning on covering. We typically have someone on site full time. In Littleton, we have a construction manager who's on site full time, managing everything day to day related to the construction site. And you have a project accountant for a handful of hours a week, 1 or 2 hours a week. Brian would have a handful of hours just making sure the project is going as, you know, your needs are being met. I really wouldn't have, you know, a lot of hours on a project. It's more making sure that the team's doing what they're supposed to be doing. But day to day, you'd have someone on the site full time coordinating with, you know, everything from the town's perspective, coordinating with Katie with, hey, this is what's happening today. Obviously, eyes and ears on the ground as far as change orders or construction issues or what might, you know, communication with our team. So usually it's a 2-person, 3-person team, and with someone on site full time.
And one thing that we like to do.
Probably.
That'd be Alan. Yep. Alan or another gentleman or woman who you feel, you know, meets your needs. But Alan's the one that would have availability a year from now, basically. He's one of the ones.
Yeah, what we find with most success too, from a project management perspective, is even if we have our full-time rep that's out there who's doing the day-to-day, our daily reports, he's looking at receipts, he's making sure that things are being designed per plans and specs. But then weekly, we'll also be holding our, what we call an AOC, which is owner, architect, and contractor meeting. We'll have that actually on site. So that would be represented by, you know, project management as well, where we would run the meeting, take minutes on this, and we're driving the schedule that way on a weekly basis. So we're not just in the office, we really, you know, we're out in the field as well. People know who we are when we're out on the site.
Especially coordinating with all the FF&E and other departments in town, working with DPW for utility connections, coordinating with utility vendors. And that's what, a lot of times people use the term clerk of the works, and we feel that our person in the field is a step above that. It's just not, hey, this was delivered today. It's really managing, you know, what's going on out there, making sure the contractor is doing things safely and the quality is right. Working with coordinating all the town departments as well, in conjunction with our team here, so.
And who, and this just occurred to me, your project accountant, who at the town, on the town side, would they be engaging with, you know, weekly or monthly in order to kind of reconcile things and make sure that the money is flowing?
Absolutely. So what's been most successful with us, with our accounting department, is that they assemble our VIP, which is all invoices throughout the entire project that's been approved by me and Matt. That goes into one fell swoop package that can be sent to whoever is dictated to as to who we're presenting that to. We would be sending that with a full distribution. And then on a monthly or quarterly basis, we would also have, you know, town accounting or town finance director that we would be able to reach out to get almost the ledger of the internal project expenditures, to make sure that we're lined up and reconciled between the two. Because when we present our invoice packet, we want to make sure that the numbers that we're showing are the same that are coming out the door from the town. Because what we've seen prior to our VIP kind of process. Some vendors may send an invoice in and it goes to town finance and the check gets cut and we don't have record of it and our budgets do not line up. So we want to make sure that we're the conduit and the tip of the spear that's funneling everything to the town. And then we just do some spot checks and reconciling with town
Yeah.
finance.
Ideally, we do that on a monthly basis, but a lot of time we'll get a munis report or something from town finance that our accounting will line up. Yep, our commitments or encumbrances match up with your expenditures. Here's everything we're recommending to the building committee for approval this month. Okay, it gets approved. That then goes to them. They know what to put on a warrant. We'll get a copy of the warrant. Yep, everything ties out. Because again, when you're looking at that budget status report, you want to know what do you have left in budget line items? Are you projecting to be under budget because we're not using all of the contingencies, per our cash flow? How are we doing on cash flow? Are we tracking on or off? What are you doing for fiscal years? However you want to see it, but ideally it'd be on a monthly basis. Sometimes it's quarterly, just depending on how busy people are. But the goal is that what the building committee sees as a monthly budget update is tied out to the penny with the town.
And we want to make sure too, talking to our PCO and change order control, is in the event that we bring something to the committee and we execute a change order to the contractor, we want to make sure that town finance has those numbers so that a purchase order can be updated so that they have an idea of what the totals are for everybody's contract that's on the job.
Good question.
So when you put the full-time construction, you call him an on-site construction manager, I think.
Yep, construction site manager.
That's included in your fee as well.
Yep, that'll be in the proposal. So the way that we do our fee proposal is that,
You must include it, I'm just guessing, you include it, but you maximize the number of hours. So if the job went 2 months long, we wouldn't get that site manager for the rest of the 2 months, right?
well, it depends.
How
on-
would that work?
Well, it depends on what the issue is, right? So typically what we do is that the site manager would be allotted 40 hours a week.
40 hours a week
You'd see
for
that
X amount of weeks.
For whatever we think that, based on schematic design, we think this is gonna be a 15-month project, right? So 15 months, you'd actually see a timeline, a little heuristic model of 15 months, times the hour, times the rate. You'd see all that broken out. Here's all the assumptions. And if something says, well, hey, we bought the lot next door, we want to do another parking lot, we're gonna extend the project 3 months, well, then we talk about it.
On a unit cost basis, basically, you just move that ahead so we'll get it, is it broken down into a unit price? So it's X amount per hour equals the volume, the cost for the week,
Yeah, you would see.
including benefits and everything else.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's all,
All that's
100%, yeah. So you'd see the hourly allotment per every staff member that we're proposing on the job. We would negotiate all of that as part of here's what we have for the schematic design phase, and then we would need to do that for the remainder of the project, so you could fit that in the
Got it.
schematic design budget. And then when we actually get to a point where, you would do an amendment at a time as we start to finalize all that. Hey, we got to the end of construction documents, and instead of 15 months, we now think it's 18 months because we're incorporating PV. Well, we still have a schematic design budget that we need to manage with the contingency, so that if we're on site for an extra month longer for the PVs, it's still not making the overall project budget go up. We're taking it from soft cost contingency. So those are types of things that you really need to put effort into when you get to schematic design. But you would always see a breakdown of, hey, this was covered, this wasn't covered, this is what we're proposing. Here's the additional hours, the additional rate. We talk about it. It's not like we're just out there and you got an invoice.
I understand.
We want to move until there's a signed amendment agreed to by the committee.
Oh, me? I think the last question, we can just avoid it. It was about software, but I think you've demonstrated that you have the software we need to do the project. I don't think that's really needed.
Something regarding software, if there's anything you'd like to see, do we have a slide regarding our daily reporting?
Yeah, there is a report.
One thing that we do that our construction site manager, everyone's trained on this, is we use a piece of software called Breakin, which
Yep.
is a daily reporting log.
That one.
And
What's it called?
Breakin.
RAKEN, great.
And it's a great tool that we use internally that provides daily, very specific information, something that ultimately, we can share as little or as much as we can with the committee, but it's something that provides us as project managers every little bit of detail that happened throughout the entire day that's out there. Not only is this valuable for us checking schedules and progress with the construction, but if there is any other questions later on in the project about what happened back in 2 months ago when there was a conflict, or what was the weather like on that Monday morning when we received a delivery, it's all something that we have documented. It's online and we're able to access it. This is also invaluable when doing change order review and in-depth review. How many guys did you have on site? Are they paying the correct prevailing wage? How many hours were they? How many hours were they doing the scope of work that we said was an actual change order work at this point? So it's really a great tool and resource that we can use. and reference back. I mean, we've had projects that a question has come up 2 years after opening, and we have a question, we're able to access this and go back to the.
Yeah, so this is an app base that every one of our project team has it on their phone. They'd have the Ayer Senior Center on their phone. Our person in the field would do a report like this every single day. It syncs automatically, with their laptop, or they're walking around with their phone. They're able to put in who's on site, working, what they're doing, how many men, how many women. They take pictures. There's questions that they answer every day regarding safety or quality or any issues, or who, did the DPW come out, or was the commissioning agent on board? Once they sign this is able to be sent externally as a PDF and an email to whomever wanted to see it on a daily basis. You can also get a monthly summary, and we can also give you access to the entire gallery. So you can click on it, look at every single picture that person's taken on site, and see all of these reports. There's a lot of other functionality that, gets more complicated with, to-do lists and checklists, but this is a great feature that then now you have a PDF you can send to whatever board you want. Or someone can be looking at, Saturday morning, they can be catching up on,
Right.
Here's what happened this week out at the project, and see all the pictures.
Really efficient where, I'll get a text message from a board committee member somewhere that says, hey, could you give me an updated picture of the multipurpose room as I'm meeting with these people for breakfast, and I want to show them. And, just having that on my phone, send it off in 2 seconds. It's been really helpful, and it works well.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
Well, I have a question. So in Littleton, you're building a community center rather than a senior center?
We are building the Center on Shattuck, which
Yeah.
is that's what we're calling it. The signage is actually showing up in the next few weeks. It's going on the outside. So the director, it's the Elder and Human Services Department that's going to be living there. We also have Veterans Affairs, as well as what we were calling that multi-purpose room, which is going to serve as kind of multifunctional things that other community and boards are going to be able to use. The commercial kitchen is also off of that multi-purpose room, so all of the events and meals and dances can all
Rental
take
options,
place
yeah.
there. So yes, that is the
So
purpose.
are there construction details that like prevent maybe, some organization that maybe wants the multipurpose room from using, say, the equipment in the gym? Are there?
No, I think it really comes down to how the town wants to use the spaces. A lot of towns now are combining services in these types of buildings to get more bang for their buck instead of having multiple footprints. And it really comes down to how you partition the building. So construction details is you'd have to think about the layout, that you could isolate certain areas where people don't necessarily need to be in the senior center on off hours, but the folks that come in, like we did this in Pembroke, they have a gym that's part of the rec center. So the senior center has a separate entrance, separate drop off. They have access to the fitness and the gym, but that door can be closed after hours. Whereas the rec kids coming in from this side to play basketball have a separate entrance. So those are the types of things that we need to flesh out in that concept model of,
Mhm.
well, this one meets all of the different needs the best, right? Because it has this layout, but it might have a larger footprint on the first floor, which then maybe takes more trees. So that's the kind of the things that we have to vet out that way. But
Yeah.
exactly right. How do you build that building up to serve the different functions?
And it's a great point in Littleton. One of the drives that we had during design is that multi-purpose room. And really that was one of the highlights and showcases they wanted to say is the amount of flexibility they're going to have. And so you have a room that's a full pickleball court right now, but we've installed, because of what the requirements were of the town, is a sliding partition wall that can come halfway through the building, and you can hold a conservation committee meeting that's going to be broadcast on the local TV while also having a card game on the other side, or a senior event that's going to be on the other side. It's an acoustical wall that would be able to break up the two rooms.
Yeah, we did that in Walpole too, with the main room had a stage, huge room for the biggest gatherings, but one portion had a lower ceiling with a partition. That became a conference room with the setup like this with monitors, where you could still use the multi-purpose room during the day for a lunch, had a separate entrance. And then also Walpole had Veterans Affairs as well, which wanted an exterior door from the parking lot. So they're not coming through the senior center lobby, but they're meeting with the veterans office, come and go as they need it.
Yeah, so I think it's just the requirements and what the town needs and wants. We've coordinated with the local TV department as well to make sure that what the town wanted was one spot of that multi-purpose broadcast. So we went through their vendor, we understood what the equipment was that they'd be bringing over, what they wouldn't, and what we needed to have And then achieve that through design and spot checks throughout design. Okay, this design that we have here is going to allow you to do this, and this at the same time. Great, this is what we want. Okay, let's move on to the next phase of design.
Great.
I have a question about Littleton. The one complaint I've heard from people who are in the yoga class, which is now held in the library, I think it is, it's 25 people, and they've been told they will not be able to be in the new senior center because they don't have adequate space.
So I'm not aware of that complaint, to be honest. Currently, in the design of the Littleton, we have two large exercise rooms, one that will be outfitted with gym equipment, and then one that will have the kind of ballet bars that go around with mirrors that will also serve as kind of a yoga and stretching room as well. And then the multi-purpose room downstairs, which is going to be the largest room in the building, will have the accommodations for any type of a function with that. As for the specific programming and the classes that are taking place, I'm not too privy to that. It's something I could ask Liz about.
Yeah, actually, it's my class, so I go to that class every week. And one of the other factors, besides the size, they talked about the size. I mean, and this is just the instructor talking. She said that there wasn't a room big enough, and the room in the library has a carpet, so, it may be that as much as size, I don't know.
So that comes into the finishes of those spaces, of how flexible you want to make those spaces and what all potential uses are. Is there a space that you need kind of like that rubberized tile because you're going to be doing some, maybe dancing or something like that? Do you have something that's going to get wet because you have an art class in there? So that's the type of decisions that we'll need to be thinking about as you've got those options about, okay, not only is it the size and location and access to spaces, but what are the finishes that go on this that give you the most flexibility? And that's common. The flooring is a big one because it dictates what you should or should not be doing.
Yeah, and that's something we would do during design as well, as working with the director, but also any of the staff that comes with it that is putting on these types of programs.
Yep.
And what we did in the multi-purpose room, and I believe up in the fitness area, is doing an analysis of bringing in some samples about, okay, here's some cork flooring on the softness on the bottom of your feet. Here's something a little more rigidity with less slipping that would be better for this area. And then you can get into what color you like and the actual finish of it. But it's something we definitely would take a priority with when we get into that finishes discussion towards the end of design, is what is the end user requirements of this? And then we can get into the colors. I don't do colors very well. I will let the end user pick those, but want to make sure that we're getting the actual product that you guys need.
Well, yeah, because technically it seems like that would have been known in advance that was an issue, because I'm in a 55 plus community and I've heard from two other people in that class, and they're all like, how can they have not, building this huge thing? So I'm just throwing that out as something.
Something to follow up.
I think that's
That's
a
out of
little
our
specific,
scope, right?
kind of out of our scope, but also like people have preferences too.
Yeah.
And so people make decisions about whether or not they're gonna hold a class in there because they want carpet, not because they need carpet. So I'm gonna pull us back there because we're really kind of over time already.
I just have one more.
Yep, no, go ahead.
One final question. Unfortunately for you, or fortunately for others, the Littleton stuff is all on video, so we have watched it. And I saw your presentation to the select board when you had to make it evident to them that the budget skyrocketed. So who was the estimator at that point in time that was your subcontractor?
So when it came to Littleton, there was a lot of moving targets and variables at the beginning of the project. At the beginning of this idea, this project had spurned out of
Oh, I saw it was behind the build over there, behind the library, then you moved to the front, you bought the house next door.
That's correct. That's correct. And we made the location on the tennis courts at that point. Presentation that was done, which was spurred out of a town hall space needs, and what the actual the highest priority needs of the town departments was the senior center at that time. The location that was picked was on the other side next to the library that we had shown. At the time when these were being estimated, it wasn't that the cost had skyrocketed. Obviously, we were going through a pandemic at that point when construction costs, we were seeing inflation costs going up over 15% year over year on certain materials. And so what happens is there was a number that was discussed by select board in the town prior to even conceptualizing what we needed. And once we got the cost, the programming done and the square footage of what the size of this building was going to be, we did an analysis on that space right there. And a lot of that had to do with the excavation and hauling costs of the material that we had. That was a big driver in showing that the budget was going to be a lot larger than anticipated at that point, which is when we started looking into other areas in that kind of campus feel that we had. The town's decision to use the tennis court site, relocate tennis courts somewhere else was more advantageous. It was going to save a significant amount of money putting it there, more of a ground up building on a flat surface there. And that was a decision that we met. I will be happy to say though, once we established where that site was and established our budget, the delivery method we used was CM at risk on that project. We got them in early. We established what our budget was going to be, and we're going to be well under budget by the time we're all done this project. I do agree with you. The number that it started, one of the select board members said, I want to build a senior center for $10 million. That's what he said to me at that point.
First number.
And
Gotta be careful.
that was prior to any programming or developing actually what the feel of this building was going to be. I will say with the square footage that we had at the time, if we didn't even have a pandemic, the $10 million was still going to be a very light number for what the needs were of the community.
Thanks.
Do you have any questions for us?
Building committee frequency, how do you guys handle the meetings? Is it something that's on a monthly basis, or it's something that you guys meet more often?
We've been meeting every other week for
Daily?
about,
Yeah.
he's working daily, yes.
Trying to use
Yeah.
the word right.
You get to where we are, we're working almost every day.
That's right. So we're comfortable, that would probably be the two most frequently cadence, either monthly or every other week, so twice a month. And again, obviously, depending on what you need to do decision wise, usually what we say to do is schedule them, twice a month. And if we don't have an update for a particular reason, you can always cancel or do something different, but at least it's on the calendar. Especially we're gonna be getting into, hey, we need to vet options on estimates, right? That's just not a once a month thing. That's probably every other week for a couple of weeks to get you that number. Once you get to construction, I mean, a project this size, you're not gonna have enough, in my opinion, to necessarily do something more than once a month. I mean, you're not gonna have, unless there's a major issue and you might have to meet, but usually once you get to construction of a project this size, it's usually monthly, but we can make whatever happen.
All right.
Yep. It's great.
Any other questions for us?
No, this is great. I appreciate all the additional questions that we'd much rather get to just the discussion portion than presentation anyway, so.
I'd appreciate the thought that went into the questions too.
Yes.
We've had some instances where you do your presentation and then you get asked a question, it's something you just said 5 seconds ago. So this is very thankful,
Yeah, it's great.
that we were able to get some good feedback.
Appreciate it.
Great. All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so
All right.
much for coming in.
Thanks
Great. Okay, yeah. Do we want to do a short,
There's actually copies of-
take a short break, committee, and then come back? We're all back, right? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so thank you everyone for being prepared for the meetings and asking great questions and great follow-up questions. I think we've got 3 wonderful candidates here. I was hoping what we could do is kind of freely discuss for a little bit, and then I'll do sort of a sense of everybody and have everybody give their first and second choice, because we need to select an OPM to negotiate a contract with, but knowing that there is a possibility that we might have to go to a number 2 if you're not able to come to any sort of, so I would love to leave this meeting with a vote on who we're selecting, but then also who the second one would be if the first does not come to fruition. Sound good?
Mhm.
All right. Anybody have opening thoughts?
I want to be the last.
Okay. I am looking back now at the, that's a good idea. So does everybody have with them the original committee totals?
Yeah, I was kind of looking at my original scores, where I had them lower on something. and see where that was.
Yeah.
That was a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, well, let me start it off. So coming out of the initial, our meeting on, Friday. Coming out of our Wednesday meeting, my initial thought was that of the two that presented that day, that for me, PMA was preferable. That they had, that their hands-on approach and that they're being at the site, it felt like they were more hands-on through the construction process and willing to put in the hours necessary to work through the construction. And Collier's seemed rather more higher level and just less engaged. I also thought that the PMA folks answered the questions with more specificity than some of the Collier's responses were. Now, I thought that Vertex was great. I thought that their presentation was solid. Their relatability through the Littleton exercise and how that kind of informed their thinking about what we might need. I thought that they were terrific. But I'm mindful of, they seem like a much bigger firm, and whether or not the cost associated with them in the long run might be more than what PMA might be. But, that's going to have to go through contract negotiations. So my thought process is now down to two, and I'm kind of mulling that over now.
I'm with you. I before I came this morning, I put down 4 words, and I think one is just being realistic, right? I mean, you can like you can like one over the other, but I think being realistic and putting the town first, what the town needs, being really focused on that, and then cost and value, right? I'm between Vertex and PMA. I think Collier's did it was great to meet them. They were very excited, I thought they were sort of very energetic in their descriptions and their communication. But I think people, like you said, PMA being on site it was like more, I think more value for, we get more value for that. Today I really like Vertex. I really think they were just engaged, they're realistic, they were not you know what I mean? They're just like kind of on board with everything. And I didn't sense any kind of oddities with any of the personalities. With PMA, no, sorry, with Collier's, I think our on-site rep was very green. I think he was really nervous, actually, in the interview process.
The word I'd like to use is hesitant, if I can say something.
Yeah,
But
go
it's
ahead.
hesitant.
Yeah,
I'm saying,
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying the word I would use is hesitant. He seemed hesitant when he answered the question.
But-
It took a little longer than
Yeah,
his comfort level.
but some people can be, they can be great, right, in the field, but in an interview process, they can be
Could be tough,
hesitant or,
yeah.
but you don't know how to read that sometimes. Yeah, and then Collier's, I think they may be kind of out of our budget.
Well, I want to caution everybody to be careful. We have not
Budget,
talked
we can't
about
talk about it, yeah.
anything, so it's
Yeah, we
really
don't
an
know.
assumption that
Right,
you're
it's an
making.
These are all large firms.
So, I don't think you could make an assumption that one is mom and pop and therefore their structure might be different, because these are all
Yeah.
big,
Yeah. the way we're
Multi-office.
Look at it is through the lens of their qualifications, right?
Yeah.
Don't even think about
Qualifications,
cost.
yeah.
Don't think about
It
cost.
says we're doing this, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's just the value of what they bring to the table, right?
So if we completely throw,
Well, wait,
I'm sorry, go ahead. No,
Let's go around the table.
Okay.
I actually differ from both of you on PMA. I actually thought they were the weakest of the three. For several reasons. They say they're an OPM only firm. And I don't see that as an advantage. I see that as a disadvantage because they don't have the backup expertise in some of the details that might be coming. Also, I was really disappointed when we talked about grants and rebates. They seemed really weak on that question, whereas Collier's sounded really, really great on that one. So, but then, you know, I mean, I really think Vertex shined above the other two. You know, well, we just had their interview with them, and you know they
Kind of
seem
an
totally
advantage being last
confident.
almost.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure that's true. But anyway, but in their packet, one of the things I was really impressed with in the packet was the multiple times that, or the multiple projects that they did for a particular town. You know, so they went to this one town and they did 15 projects for that town. Well, I mean, you know, to know them is to love them is, I think, the quote that they put in there. And I think that speaks highly, you know, and in Littleton, you know, they've done a whole bunch of different projects in Littleton in particular. So, I mean, I'm leaning heavily, I mean, my vote will be heavily weighed to Vertex with Collier second and PMA third.
I actually liked PMA better than Collier. The thing I loved about Collier was that woman who handled all their utilities and yeah, I thought she was phenomenal.
Great, yeah.
You know, she could hire her separately. But the rest of it, and I didn't like that they were gonna have less people on site less time. But you know, I liked PMA. I liked a lot of what they said about helping with the outreach and things like that. But I really did like Vertex the best. I liked a lot of the forms and things that they said they were going to use. I liked the way they explained them and why they use them and how they work. And I felt like they made a lot of sense and they would be easy to work with. I like the idea they were going to have somebody on site every day above a clerk of the works, as he described it. But they,
Okay.
yeah, I'm not
That's a
saying
marketing
that's-
name.
yeah.
That's all it is.
but and they also are very aware about outreach and working with towns. I don't know, but I felt and I thought that Vertex was the best, but PMA for me would be the second. Dan, do you want to say?
Yeah, because you last, right? I think I've,
Actually, you were boss, you did go last.
yeah. No, most, you know, you guys hit pretty much all I had written down. I think the good news is either way, we're getting a pretty quality firm. I feel like that's gonna help us. You know, one thing is it was great to get to meet kind of staff that we might end up dealing with. And I think with Vertex, you know, there was the three gentlemen here, but the project manager in the middle is the guy who we deal with a lot. And it seemed like he really gets it and he answered a lot of questions. You know, Collier, there was always there. The one guy who was answering all the questions and we mentioned the hesitant project manager we'd probably be dealing with. And PMA, I think that the staff was a little better. I remember that the grant, when we asked them about that and they didn't really, you know, because we're going to need help as we approach this town meeting, as we do the funding. I don't know how much help they would have been there. Pretty much all the other stuff you guys get. So I'm leaning Vertex as one and then two or three. I mean, second place doesn't matter here, but you know, I could
Well,
probably lean PMA on that second,
but to that point, I think that if we have two motions, one for the initial firm to enter into contract negotiations with, and then the second firm,
yeah, it actually does.
that we're gonna have a
Yeah.
second vote on number two, I think.
So I've got a 1 and 2 for Ellen, Carolyn, and Dan. Somebody, I was did you guys have a 1 and 2? Because you said you weren't sure yet. Did you have a clear 1 and 2?
Clear one is Vertex.
Okay.
No, I would agree with that. I didn't want to, I wanted some time to, but I do think that Vertex, and part of it is the Brian that was sitting in the middle. I thought that even difficult questions, the one that Ken asked that could have thrown someone off their game. He seemed forthright. He understood where the issue was regarding the change in the cost estimates.
Never told me who the estimator was.
What's that?
He never told me who the estimator was. I asked him that, who the estimator was. I don't think he never told me. He gave the process.
Yeah.
I was interested in who the estimator was.
But I thought that his explanation that the
The
scope,
explanation was fine.
yeah, that the scope of the project had changed significantly and that the initial number that had been tossed out was not realistic, given what they ended up wanting and needing.
Right. It was really good for us to hear that.
Oh, yeah.
In case we go through the same thing.
Yeah.
Some strange way.
And I think that their point that the initial number, which for us is 16.6, I mean, they're stressing the fact that that number is the one that, I mean, they seem, and their answer to my question regarding kind of the back office accounting process, I thought was pretty complete. That how they would want to manage the accounting as the project unfolded over time. But I'm mindful of the fact that this thing, our initial contract negotiations is simply for the schematic design process. And so we'll see how that plays out. But I would say that, for Vertex would be my number 1 and PMA my number 2.
Do you want to go last? I'll put mine in. I tend to agree with Dan in the sense that all 3 of these are very qualified firms. If I had to pick my top 2, it would definitely be Vertex and PMA. I just looking at who presented and the way they interacted with us, and like Dan said, the Collier stayed at a really high level, and I didn't get the immediate ability to say, oh, we're going to relate well, like with this group. So, again, they're all qualified. So I think I probably would put Vertex maybe slightly higher than PMA, but I could really go either way on that one. I think they both had pros and cons.
I don't like to disagree with Carolyn, who's right next to me. I really respect Carolyn a long time ago. And in a very ironic twist, this has nothing to do with my decision. Carolyn and I are on a special committee in town, which has never had a meeting. And we're appointed to it.
At least 10 years.
It's an energy management committee.
Energy.
And this will be our first project that we'll review as an energy management committee.
Oh,
Wow.
So, because we're a green community. Okay, here's my.
You meant when I first started.
To me, it was the same as Dennis on day 1. And I'll tell you what surprised me about the Colliers so much was they had the biggest deal and a small piece of paper that they put down in front of us, which I just thought was very immature to come to a meeting like this with that little piece of paper. The other 2 gentlemen, and unfortunately, I disagree with Carolyn. I thought PMA was eminently qualified, and the depth of their engineering department is there. We may not have come up as a question, but they have a full-fledged, every single piece of the project is in-house. So they do have MEP in-house, they do have all the engineering, they do all the other aspects within their house. Vertex did a great job. I thought something happened today that was different from the other 2 interviews that was significant in my mind. And we asked them to stay in 10 or 15 minutes. They basically took over the whole room with that half-an-hour presentation that they had. So they had a huge advantage over everybody else in the fact that we let them go through this whole thing, which I thought was very kind of us, but they did get out a lot of points. The difference between Vertex, so Colliers is number 3 in my mind. I thought the major difference between Colliers and PMA was that
You mean
Colliers-
You mean Vertex?
excuse me, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting me. Between Vertex and PMA, I didn't think Vertex understood anything about how much work we've done so far. They indicated that they basically would have to do everything right from the start. I don't think they looked at any of our documents. It was like, yeah, we have to help you with this, we have to help you with that, we've done so much of that. We're way beyond the initial stages already, well into the budget, well into the feasibility study. I don't think they understood the depth of the feasibility study that in fact, we were doing it for like 6 or 7 months. They can do all of that. It just, the PMA did state that right up front, that we've been on your website, we've looked at where you are, we understand you're in the schematic design. It was almost like they were giving us, I'm looking at it different than you guys, only because they have more experience with it, I guess. They were teaching us stuff today, which is great, it was a great presentation. So I'm gonna go with you guys. To me, they're dead even, basically, either one of them can do it.
That is a good point.
Polly is, excuse me?
I was just gonna say, that is a good point, that PMA really had done a lot of
Yeah.
due diligence beforehand. They had even gone to the effort of
To the
writing
site.
up a new,
Yeah.
but they had written up the
up a
contract for
backup
the
deal.
design in
Yeah.
case we were gonna put out another bid, in case we weren't sticking with Catlin.
Yeah. I thought that-
Versus Vertex said, no, I haven't looked at any of the budget numbers, only the.
Well, they didn't say it, but
No,
just
he
the way
did,
they,
actually.
oh.
No, you said, have you seen
Okay,
any of that
that's
work?
right.
And he said, no, I haven't looked at any of that. He just took it, which I mean, he doesn't have to, but.
They're great, and they're obviously a great firm. It was just that little piece of preparation that made me feel like we were a committee that hadn't done much already. That's the feeling I got from that statement. So we have worked our asses off literally for months here with meetings and Duggan's. For instance, they said we were considering the land. We spent 6 months. The schedule they put up on the board of the items that they're gonna do in their, what they call it,
Extreme yellow.
Yeah.
we did that.
Analysis.
Catlin gave us the
Right.
thing. We had a numbered thing. We did the same. You weren't there. It was early before I think you were involved. Maybe. He had the same format. We checked off all these boxes as we
Yeah.
scoped it down into the small decision that we had. We were left with 2 pieces of land.
Yeah.
So that was different to me.
Yeah.
And I thought the time they took gave them a huge advantage over the other guys, having had that much time to talk and just take control of the room instead of being squeezed in at, 15 minutes at the beginning or something like that. So to me, they're both qualified. The town will work, it just seems to be, we may have to spend more time with Vertex to let them know where we are,
Well, and we did not.
but they're good. They're both
Yeah,
good.
I mean, I was a little surprised that Vertex didn't say, well, we've driven by the site, especially given that on their way to work, they would almost have to drive by the site. So to your point, I think that PMA did in fact do their homework a little more thoroughly. That being said, we did not offer to Vertex, well, this is exactly where we are on the project, and we didn't explain that
Well, we couldn't. They had,
at any point during their
we couldn't say.
At any point during their presentation, we could have interrupted and told them precisely
Yeah.
where we were.
I could, we could.
Well, and I think that's part of why you have the questions designed the way they are, to try and keep it as uniform as possible. But there is obviously human variation in the process.
I think at the end of the day, the committee's gonna make a decision. They're both great companies, in my estimation. Unfortunately, I do disagree with.
So is your vote is a tie? Okay, all right.
My vote's PMA, number 1.
Okay.
Excuse me, Vertex number 2. And just to follow up one more thing on I think the real big difference here is that, and it depends on where we have our focus. So for instance, even, I'm not trying to make a big deal out of this, but we've done a lot of public outreach already. We've posted it online. Our brochure is up there. We've shown what we've done, and we went to these committees. We already went to capital planning, finance. So they listed things like they were teaching us what we had to do.
Right.
So they didn't do much research on that. But at the end of the day, I thought the difference between the two is PMA may not be as good a communicator to the public as Vertex. but may have a stronger engineering and construction background as far as managing it on the job site. That's a decision we have to decide. There's no question Vertex is great in front of the community. So maybe they're stronger there. That's why it's a tie.
And yeah, and I mean, well, I think that's where we need the strength, but my viewpoint is so limited, since I haven't been involved in these projects.
Well, none of us
So-
have done much.
I'm looking at that a little bit differently. I'm thinking you guys are members of the community, and I am, to the sense that I'm the COA director. What we're really hiring the OPM for is to handle all of these logistics along
A lot of it.
a lot of it. So, I mean, I think we are going to be still taking the lead in all of this public outreach because, but coming up with all of those, the change orders, the invoices, all those things, Dan and I both have a full-time job already. So, their organization and their being the go-between, I think, is really going to be the main thing we're hiring them for. And none of them said they weren't willing to help us with any of the public outreach. There was differences in terms of their openness to grants, but I don't know that, for myself, I don't know that I would make a decision based on solely on their public outreach piece.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are we
Amy.
still planning to do reference checks?
So, I mean, we did a certain number of them. I mean, we reached out to people who were using them. We talked to Liz, we talked to, what was her name? Sorry. So what I had written down was that it was a glowing review from Liz for Vertex.
Yes, no, I'm,
And for PMA, oh, I lost my sticky note that was in there from our previous conversation. So I don't know. I lost my sticky. Let me find it. But it was, but that was also positive. Oh, here it is. It was, Long Meadow was a static. Was what I had.
for Bert, I mean, again, it was Middle Brian, I think, his walking through the process, the logistics of the timing of the deliveries and handling all of that work to get it open and not have people running into each other. And he seemed to have a clear understanding of how important that is and that he would be on top of it. That is, it wouldn't come as a surprise. Any of the potential glitches that can arise during that process, that they would not be taken by surprise by any of that. For PMA, I thought that the on-the-ground construction visualization, I thought that they were really great, especially their project.
The guy that brought the kid in with him, the gentleman in with him.
Yeah.
It's gonna be on the job.
Yeah, and
They're
they're
committed to 4 of them.
Yep, and then the other gentleman who was, who had been a journeyman carpenter and also I got the sense from them that they knew how to build things, that they had actually themselves built things. So that but to Carolyn's point about the fact that Vertex may be somewhat more polished in presentations to the public and able to kind of communicate that in a authoritative way, I saw as I mean, that's going to be helpful to us.
I just want to clarify that Long Meadow was Collier's. So that was and then,
We haven't talked to anybody. about
I didn't have anybody for PMA.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify
So
that.
we haven't checked North Andover or Andover for PMA?
PMA did stuff in
So-
Acton as well.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked to North Andover, but on their existing one. So they
Oh,
didn't,
right.
they were not the project, the OPM for the new senior center, it was the previous one
Yeah.
before that.
Well, North Andover was already gotten 2 and we haven't even gotten to one.
Two separate towns, very different.
Was PMA the one that hadn't done many senior centers other than that?
No, PMA had,
Two, I think.
Holliston, Mendon, I thought,
And Saugus, maybe?
and North Andover.
Andover Rob Center.
Yeah,
That was a big renovation.
we saw that
saw
one.
that.
We went to that one.
Oh, you guys
Yeah,
did?
yep.
Yeah. Well, I
It's an
think,
old
Someone
building,
else was
probably,
with us, right?
Old
I
building.
think it was, Alan, were you with me?
Andover? We went to North Andover.
Yeah, but we also, Dennis and I went to
And there was a third
Andover.
person.
It's the one that was the redone school.
Yeah.
I didn't.
I don't
Okay,
remember
I don't
that.
know, maybe it was just you and I, I'm not sure. I
I
thought
think
there was
a
somebody
third-
else.
Maybe?
I don't
But there's
remember.
I
somebody-
think it's an
It
interesting
was a while ago.
conversation that what,
Oh, it was a long time.
They had just opened,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
does it matter? How many seen, I've thought this
No,
from
I
the
was
beginning,
just,
but I think what might matter is having worked with John Callum.
yeah.
So can we?
Good, bad, he almost said the good, the bad, and the ugly. You know, which is what kind of everybody says about
Just
that.
slightly off topic. I was not a big fan of Val at the beginning, but I can tell you right now that he's led us down the correct path. And if you notice that we've done all the steps, including this step, in the correct order, which
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
me feel.
No, I agree.
Pretty happy about that as a
Yeah.
taxpayer.
Yeah, I
Where
mean,
do you want to be?
Even if we go with Vertex and they haven't put in all the front end,
We'll catch up.
you know,
with that.
research, we can catch them up pretty quickly. And I think they'll be nothing but impressed and happy that so much of this has already been done.
I just hope that when they, how do we transfer that information over in an unbiased fashion in the fee? Now, they want to supposed to talk about the fee, but if they don't anticipate what we've done already, will they have a higher fee for the schematic
You can ask
design?
them to check it out before they do it.
But I mean, I think that as part of the contract negotiation.
Okay, well, we get right there.
That subcommittee will inform them as to what tasks have already been accomplished.
Exactly. So I should have thought of that. So they're gonna give, somebody's gonna give us a number after we select. And that number, then we're gonna research on our own based on where we are and how much they've included, and that's the negotiation to get us to. I'm gonna agree with whatever the majority does from the board, because to me, it's a tie between those two.
Yeah, I mean, it seems overwhelmingly, no one has championed Colliers. And the vast,
They were two.
right, they were your number two. So Vertex, if I'm understanding correctly, is everyone's first choice except for Ken's. I had a tie. So even if we put even if you and I put them as second, there's still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of
Yeah.
the 7 of us put Vertex.
Did Dan voice that?
Yeah.
You did?
It seems like Vertex one,
Yeah.
MA two, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so,
So I'll make a motion.
That the committee recommend to the town of Ayer that they enter into contract negotiations with Vertex for the purposes of acquiring an OPM for the senior center building project. And then I would suggest that, well,
Have to vote.
Second.
any discussion for the vote?
Were you gonna say something? No.
well, no, let's have this vote first and then.
They have discussion.
Huh?
One more thing to validate Vertex is the fact that they had two people within a half an hour of the job.
Yes, I thought that was good.
Oh, I did
That is
too.
important.
Yeah, yeah.
When this,
Yeah,
two people within a half an hour, living
Oh,
within a
yeah.
half an hour of the project.
Yeah,
The
It's
other
gonna
two-
have them on speed dial.
the other people are out. But, yeah.
yeah.
And going backwards, this probably doesn't apply. Having been a project manager, that's what I did for a long, long time. Okay. There's nobody here that said anything different than what a project manager is supposed to do. As far as the construction side. The difference is that all this other shit you have to do because it's a town project before the construction starts. So the anticipation of town meetings and going through all these planning, all these different meetings is so much different than an average project manager does in the real world. You work for a contract, you bid it out, you give it out, you manage it. You don't have to go to all these town stuff. So
Mhm.
But they seem to be very well.
They're comfortable with it.
experienced.
Yeah, okay. That was all I had for discussion.
Just Max.
Oh, okay. Because there was somebody else earlier.
So
Okay,
there's,
they did, okay.
there's a motion on the floor. It's been-
Yeah, is there, who seconded it?
We did.
Okay.
Pick your poison.
Okay, all right, so we're all here, so we can just do, so all in favor of Vertex? Yeah, okay. Chair says aye.
I'll say aye,
Aye, okay.
because I said I'd go with the committee.
Okay, chair says aye. We have selected Vertex as our first choice for an OPM. Yay.
So,
It's a big step forward for us. I'm excited.
so I'd like to make a second motion that if contract negotiations with Vertex Corporation do not result in a signed contract, that the town enter into negotiations with PMA for the purposes of hiring a OPM for the senior center building project.
Second,
Okay, all in favor? Or actually, any discussion first before that?
I just want to thank Dennis for his nice motion. Well done.
And a big thanks to Dan for all of the work to put this out and coordinate everybody and the responses. Yeah. All right. All in favor?
Hi.
Chair says aye.
Unanimous.
All right. Wonderful. Okay, so next on the agenda, I had discussion of schematic design contracts. I just wanted to provide an update there. The correct order of operations, and thanks Dan for clarifying that, is that we do need to wait till we bring the OPM on board and then they will review that contract. And so we'll just table that for now.
You don't want any discussion on it?
I mean, I guess we can discuss it, but we can't vote to execute it right now.
I get it. So there was a subgroup of me and you, I guess, and Dave that was supposed to look at this, but we never really got together because of this OPM thing.
That's
and
true.
whatnot. And, but what we do know is that the original cost, this is from the original contract that John gave us for this phase, was like 260. And the number now, I think, is 171.
Yeah.
So I'm of the thought that Mr. Catlin will not lower that number. Because he's already lowered it. And it'll just be a point working with the OPM on the particulars of the language. I don't think we have any, I think we're gonna find that we don't have any strategy to lower the price anymore, because he's already lowered the price substantially. So that's just what I have to say at this point. I know we have to do it. We have to go back to somebody look at the language. But we're capable of doing it the first time around with John, the feasibility study as well. So we've accomplished a lot.
Agreed.
What do we have to do in terms of, does this have to go at a selectmen's meeting that we have to ask them to approve this?
No, so the process, Dan and I talked to Carly after our last meeting, would be that a subgroup will handle the actual negotiation. You'll reach out to those that we didn't, everyone except these final three, right? And let them know that they weren't selected for the interview process, right? And then,
Yeah, I think I'll wait till we get a contract in place.
Okay.
And then I'll reach out to all the firms.
okay,
But yeah, I think you're right, heading down the right road. So, you know, a subgroup, ends up getting signed by the town manager, this agreement. So really, we can work directly with Vertex on this negotiation.
I thought that was a good question that Ellen had, because it keeps being important to me to let the town know that we're still under budget in what we're doing and haven't spent a dime. So basically what happened is we went to the select board, we gave them a long list of costs that got us to the 360 or something like that. And we're still within that.
Yeah.
We're still within that number.
I mean, I think that, you know, this will have to, but the space between the June 30th
Yep.
And when we have additional funds available at town meeting, we've got like 4 months there, 5 months. Well, 4 months, let's say, that we're not gonna have any money to spend or very, very little money to spend. And how do we keep the OPM engaged through that process?
Right, so
That
might be
on
discussion
the
with
promise
Robert's office.
that, or on the expectation that this is going to come to fruition? And how do we kind of interpersonally bridge that gap? But also how do we get what we need done prior to town meeting?
Isn't
Right.
there a new contract that has to be? So Vertex is just doing the schematic, I mean, if we, right?
Mhm.
And then with construction, isn't it a new
Start over.
contract?
Yeah, we
Start
would,
It's a
all
new
over again?
contract, yeah.
yeah, we would set up a second contract or do it as an amendment.
But we won't be able to execute that contract until late October, perhaps.
So.
Right, so they won't be doing anything.
Well, that's the $1 million question.
I'm sorry, what was the,
So they'll do the work for the schematic design and
Right.
get to the end,
right,
right? And then there'll be a waiting period and then,
correct.
We'll be marketing.
There's a little bit of UDAG money that does not have to be spent by June 30th, but it's not much, like $12,000 or $14,000. So that will be what we would have to work with. And I've talked with Alicia about whether it's appropriate to, because the Housing Choice Grant is for a maximum of 500,000. And so we have received 300,000. So she's going to talk with the grant administrator to figure out whether the next phase is still a fit with the housing choice and whether we would have potential to get 200,000 more, if it is, whether we'd have the potential to get up to 200,000 more because it's the same project, or to go for a new project, and for construction phase essentially, and have that 500,000 open. So she has to talk. A lot of that is just one-on-one conversation with the grant administrator to figure out where something might slot in. So I haven't heard back from her yet. I'll try and get an update on that. But yeah, I think that the schematic design itself with Catlin and then the OPM's work on the schematic design is still going to have to be done by June 30th, because we have already missed the deadline for asking for an extension on this grant because it was in January sometime. So, and I don't think we're going to have any trouble spending it by then. It's just a matter of what we do with that gap between June 30th and whether we're still not clear whether we would have a meeting in September or whether we're waiting till the end of October for the official special town meeting. So that's all to be determined.
I'd like to make a small comment on that.
Mhm.
So one thing that we found out today, we found out a lot through the process. Not the least of which we asked the same question about June 30th. And everybody pretty much said that's not a problem.
Mhm.
And they verified it today, but a little bit more, and went into a little more depth, which was good about the schematic design. Which leads me to the point that we're gonna have a full-fledged budget by June 30th. Because when the schematic design is done, we've got basically an assurance that that's when our budget, that was a great conversation today. We were made aware again that we don't have to go beyond schematic design to get what we need to get to a town meeting. So what I'm contending is that when we get to the late into June 30th, we will easily be able to go back to the select board and ask if we need more of the UDAG funds or things like that, not the grant.
Yeah.
Because by then we will have proven, here's where we are, here's the real number, and we can either live with it or die with it. So they should then be open to the fact to give us another 25,000 or some small amount of money if we need it to cover that distance,
Well, that's a good point.
because by then we're gonna know. There won't be any more speculation. The number will be a real number by then.
Well,
We're gonna work our asses off between now and then to continue to save money. To find out through schematic design if we make a change. By then we should have well, we won't have the number from the electric company, unfortunately, by then. We might, it's possible we could get lucky. They said August 1st.
But his explanation,
Anyway,
I thought that Vertex's explanation of how the contingency works and.
That was a design contingency, which we hadn't heard before from anybody, which is interesting.
Right, but the fact that the number that we have been operating off of is 16.6, and now perhaps a new number at the end of the schematic design, and we get the reconciliation process with the cost estimates. I now have a clearer understanding of how the contingency works to
contingency?
protect, what's that?
They were talking about a design contingency, not our contingency. Two different things.
So our contingency
Yeah,
is,
it was interesting what they said. They said something today we hadn't heard from anybody else, including John, okay? So in the process of working out budgets with John, he gave me Fogarty's long breakdown of numbers for other projects, two of them. So within that, I summarized it and turned it into a real number, which we haven't voted on, okay, really. So John is still using the square foot number that they talked about. Today, what they said was interesting is they're applying square foot numbers to each of the categories. That's not the way I was thinking of it. So but they're still saying that through schematic design, the best we can get is a square foot number for HVAC, a square foot number for electrical, a square foot number for this, a square foot number for that, coming out to a 700 and somebody square feet. I'm saying, no, I need to know it's 185,000 for this, for steel, and I need to know it's 700. I need a real number, not a square foot number. So I don't know how we're gonna work that out. We'll get closer.
But I say,
But then they said, we'll take that and we'll put a design contingency on it. So they'll say, let's have a 15% getaway on this number. And then as we do the next stage, that'll become 10. At the bottom of the page is our contingency for the whole project, 3% or whatever we're carrying for the whole number. They want to work that's a separate piece they're going to work down as they get closer to the design, the final design.
Mhm.
But the thing was good about it was that the number doesn't change.
Right.
They just said, we'll put this much here, and as we get, so there'll be decisions made that we need to cut over here, add over there. Shrink it
Well,
down.
similar to what John did, that is, if the contingency is big enough, you can decrease the contingency while you're adding costs.
Right.
But for public consumption, or, the overall number hasn't changed.
right,
And the fact that he said it was within 1 or 2%, I thought was pretty remarkable. That they could get within 1 or 2%, and feel comfortable that they were where they need to be.
Because I thought that was the most important thing we learned, was the fact that
Yeah.
we now know that all these guys do in schools and shit like that, big jobs, is they take it through with schematic design. It's pretty amazing, 100 and something, 200 million for schools, and they take it to the schematic, and that's it. Because it's so much more money for a town. How do you commit as a town to go to the full documents?
Right.
You'd never get there. It spends such a fortune.
Yeah.
Dan, did you want to?
Yeah,
That's
so,
apparently the way they do it.
when we were talking earlier about, telling the OPMs about, this, so we do, as part of the RFQ process, we do have to have a final ranking. We had our initial ranking, now we've done interviews. So now we set up a final ranking. So I think we had, before we came to these interviews, we didn't know who the top 3 are. Now we know those. So I don't know if you want to put together the final rank list, and then I think we can let the OPMs know this is the final
You
ranking.
mean the ones that weren't the final 3?
Of all 11?
Yeah, we need just, all of them. We need that a rank.
Going back to that score.
Yeah, that's
So then-
technically what we're supposed to do in the RFQ.
Okay, so
process.
then we could take our top 3 and rank them that way, and then use our total scores from before to rank all the rest of them from there. Okay, all right, I'll do that.
Acceptable, yeah.
Okay,
And then I can send that out to the OPMs and just let them know where the committee's at. And if they want to talk to me, they can. What?
The guy from Concord came in last.
Yeah.
Who came in last?
Some gentleman from
I don't
Concord.
know.
It's like him.
Good to know how you do.
Friend of his or something, I forget what it was. It wasn't not a company though.
Okay, so that's how PMA is gonna find out they're second.
Yeah, so I'll tell them if they want to talk. I'll talk to them, tell them a little bit more.
So you know what?
How soon will you have that out? do you think?
Probably next week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Again, this is so different than the real world.
I know.
Well,
If you-
Oh, I know.
Real world,
People
the
probably
private
choose
world.
me before I can
First
give
and
that to you,
second
because I've
real
got to
world.
finish the newsletter today.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Get it out
Give me your
on
final
Monday,
price.
And then it'll be Tuesday.
Yeah, and
Hold
there's no
on,
rush
if
on it.
Okay.
You know who's 1 and 2? Do you want to give us another number? Then they go back to work and give you a number. then you make your final pick.
No, I know. I mean,
It's so strange.
this whole process provided some insight into how the public process doesn't always necessarily work to the public benefit.
That's why you can't get anything built.
Well, I remember when they hired me to be the Centennial Coordinator for the parks, and they had this huge long list of things to do, and they said, can you do this? And I said, yes. And I said, I told people later, they didn't say I was gonna have to do it with both hands tied behind my back, and, blindfold, because it was like every time you tried to do something, it was such a process, and I was just so self-defeating.
We're in that process a little bit with the environmental people. This was great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
when
kinda
do
want
when do we want to meet again? There's no public here, right? The one
Right, I
other
think it's just
person
Max.
dropped off. Okay.
Well,
Correct.
Okay. So when do we want to meet again?
Do we have anything to do?
So I think
Because that's, so I'm wondering, I don't think we necessarily.
do we need to appoint the subcommittee or ask members of this committee to act as the negotiating team?
Yeah, I think you just, maybe like me, Katie and Ken or something like that, work together with the town manager's office and negotiate and then come back to the committee. So
Yep,
I'm just.
that's fine with me. Is that fine with
I'm
everybody?
like volunteering people.
Fine with me.
I hope Ken would want to do it.
Yeah, it's like, it's not a big.
You can go by me if I can.
So when do you three anticipate being able to enter into negotiations with
We
Vertex?
have to wait for them to send us the
Yeah,
contract.
Yeah,
They'll
well,
have to send.
So all I would say is our next meeting shouldn't happen until after you have an update on the contract.
Right, right. So,
Probably at least 3 weeks, huh?
feel like I have most of it done next week.
When when you approach Vertex at this point in time, are we gonna tell them we need it by next Friday or some date? Next Wednesday? We're gonna tell them we've found you to be the most qualified OPM. We expect your proposal by such and such a time. You can't just say you're good and just wait for months.
Because remember.
Right, yeah.
I think within a week or two, right?
John can't
Not
do,
two, should be one.
but John can't do this, John can't do the schematics until we've got this contract signed with Vertex presumably. John has asked for something on the order of 3 months, 2.5,
Yeah.
3 months to, and we need to get it done by the end of June.
I think,
So mid-March,
The only conversation that can possibly happen here, that's, and I shouldn't say it, outside the realm of perfection, is we know we're gonna give Catlin the feasibility study. Is he willing to start without a contract?
no, I know.
And
yes, yeah.
and then with the OPM and with John and with the committee, we negotiate the final little tidbits of the contract, yet the amount is already out there.
Is that kosher?
I don't know.
When we have an
Kosher in the real world, it
OPM
might not be
coming on?
kosher.
Well, I don't know.
I think we tentatively just have a meeting, not next week, but the week after, say Thursday, the 6th. I don't know. Those are good date.
Oh, I'm
but
having
then-
surgery. I'm having cataract.
But I think just having something on the books and
Cataract.
Ken, Katie and I will work, with
I had
Vertex
one
as
now.
quickly as we can to put this together. We don't know how, we'll tell them, look, I want this at least by the end of next week. Maybe they can turn around quickly. Like, we do this all the time.
Cause
So,
they'll send it to us, we'll have to meet, we'll have to get back to them.
Yeah, it could be,
Week and a half.
into the week after next. So maybe by Thursday, the 6th, we've got something. And if not, then we can just nix that meeting and reschedule. But I would aim to, in the interest of time, like we're talking about getting Catlin design
Yeah.
going.
You know, it would be cool. is if we could
Shouldn't
get
take too long
The
to rush.
contract they have with Littleton.
I know, that's what I was thinking. It's probably a way to.
Just ask Littleton for their contract. It's an open meeting law thing.
It's not online? Is it
I
online?
don't know.
But I think that their contract was for the whole shebang, not just the
Fine.
schematic. work.
But the
Okay.
language will be similar.
And the rates, yeah, we can.
Yeah.
For the schematic. Part of the negotiation should be that the work that this committee and the town has done up to this point,
Yeah.
they don't have to do that.
But they,
Yeah, that'll
Oh,
be-
yeah. Right.
It will lay out their scope and that will be part of it.
but they know,
Yeah.
didn't they negotiate pre-COVID? I mean, they've been doing this for a while. He said the reason the cost went up was
Yeah.
because they got into COVID, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I'm not so much interested in the cost as the.
Every
as
month
the
it was like
word.
Yeah.
We have to change any of the word.
Yeah.
Remember
okay.
how Colliers came in? One thing that Colliers did was interesting. They waived some liability in their
Right.
proposal. So that's the kind of stuff
Yeah.
some little tidbits like that.
Now, do we have to include, when we ask them for what they're gonna do, some links or something to background on what our committee has already done? So
Yeah,
they'll,
we'll go over the scope with them and that will be part of it. I don't know if it'll be written
Yeah.
in the agreement, but it'll be acknowledged that those aren't part of their scope.
we ought to tell them that the committee felt they weren't quite up to speed on where we were.
Yeah.
In terms of the project, really, because other ones weren't.
But we still need work for town meeting, right? All town meeting, if that's where we're headed,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I'm just
I think
saying.
so
they ought to make
mailers
sure
and-
they-
Yeah.
Video maybe, you know, and.
We'll talk to them about how to put that in there, but you know, we definitely know we need schematic design. And then maybe we have an amendment to do further work between schematic and town meeting. We can come up at
Yeah,
that time, or we could
right.
work it in as an option in the contract that
Right,
gets,
right.
we can authorize later, stuff like
Yeah,
that.
'cause you kind of want, you want them to be the sort of the face at town meeting, Catlin and Vertex.
Yeah, we would.
Then, you know.
I thought it was a baby crying.
One of the things that.
I think it's a cart.
One of the things they mentioned about going to different committees. Under the schematic design, it's critical that Catlin will be giving us a site plan, which they will be doing with one of his subcontractors, that he has as part of his proposal. Because that step has to go to the planning board. And has to go to this ENR, we're gonna have to, this environmental notification form, we're gonna have to fill out with the environmental people, MIPA, or whatever they are. Yeah, and so the site plan that actually.
Maybe not even longer.
Maybe not. That would be the biggest breakthrough.
They may be good
Sorry.
for
Yeah, that would be the breakthrough. Tell you what, it's us against the Turtles right now. I'll be honest with you.
It is, yeah.
It's what?
It comes down to this project, comes down to senior centers or seniors against Turtles.
Blanding turtles,
Landing
We're
turtles.
bigger than they are.
not just any turtles.
So that's how ridiculous it is when you get right down to the substance of it.
Well, it's not
But
a,
the point is that that was a
Wasn't
great
really an
statement
either or.
regarding the meetings because we need a site plan from Catlin for the feasibility. So part of what we're gonna have to manage with Catlin is his sequence. Get the site plan done right away, John. Get that vendor going. And take all the time you need to figure out where the heating and cooling and all that stuff is, but get that, your site engineer, who he controls. We asked him that at the very beginning. He wants to be under his control, and I guess it has to be by statute.
And are we going to hand off, and again, presuming Vertex, are we going to hand off to Vertex, working with the National Wildlife Refuge and getting all those?
We're gonna, I think the best thing is Dan and I meet with them, we go over where we are. They will then tell us what they can help us with or what they can't.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, for me,
If they
I think
have
the
a
more that-
contact that could help.
right,
So I have some contacts. Dan has some contacts. Maybe they have more contacts.
Right.
All of it together may be put the package
but
better.
what I would say is that to the extent that we can afford to pay them, that is, to the extent that we can have them take that off your table, Dan specifically, but also Katie and Ken, that to me is a good thing. So, you know, to the extent that they are able, willing, and that we can afford to have them pick up those, you know, logistical pieces there, I think that's all to the good.
The only problem with that is my own personality. I'm sorry.
There are no problems.
Having to be a control freak, that's a problem. Being controlled away is a big.
We should have been interviewing you. Like, can we work with you?
Let it go, let it go, let it go.
Meditation every morning. You guys are doing yoga, I'm meditating.
so we have our next meeting Thursday, March 6th. Are we, that's okay. It's a marathon and I'll send you the link right afterwards so you can stay caught up and that
Well, I
meeting
mean, my
could
surgery
move.
is at 6 a.m, so.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
could
but
probably-
still,
Were you having it done? Were you having it done?
As Ayer.
All right.
Good. So are we
So what did you
then
say?
moving back to 6 PM at the senior center? I think that's the only way I can guarantee that
Yeah.
date, you know, and time. Okay.
Think of how lovely it's gonna be to bring Vertex to all our meetings. at the senior center.
Well, I would like them to
I
make. a
love how you
video.
got-
We
I-
were talking about
Yeah,
making a
that would be
video.
good.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I know. You should see it.
I know. I love how you're embarrassed to bring Vertex down there for a couple of meetings. That's where I work every day. Thursday, March 6th at 6 PM at the senior center. But I mean, they won't be at that meeting yet by that point. I mean, if they are, that'd be amazing, but no.
Feel good
Probably
about
not.
this.
It was,
Yeah.
you guys are doing a great job. That's amazing.
This whole committee is doing a great job.
Doing a good job too.
Oh, my God.
Well, thank you, everyone. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay. All right, all in favor?
Bye.
Uh,
Hi.
Chair says aye. Adjourned at